Hey, Sleepy Cartoon fan, SleepyToons loves you. Where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Scoot a little deeper under your blanket. Tonight we're strolling through the cozy corners of your childhood, one glow at a time. First, a hush on the plains, a lonely farmhouse, a screen door that sighs, and a brave little heart that checks every shadow so you don't have to. Courage taught us that fear can be gentle if someone stays by the porch light. Then, a moonlit road, measured footsteps, bamboo whispering, and a blade that catches the starlight but never needs to shout. Samurai Jack reminded us that quiet can be the strongest sound. Now the soft buzz of sci-fi sleep mode, a mint green glow, a robot's sleepy giggle, and plans far too big for lunchtime, dimming down to dreams. Invader Zim made weird feel wonderful. Finally, the harbor. Rope coils, wooden docks, maps to candy sweet places, and a ship that creaks like a lullaby. Flapjack showed us adventure can rock you to sleep. Breathe in, breathe out. The channel's turning for you, slow and kind. Let the nostalgia tuck you in. Let's start our first old cartoon. Say a hello to our very own Courage the Cowardly Dog. The wind crosses a wide and lonely plain and finds a small wooden house, quiet as a held breath. The boards remember every afternoon of sunlight and every midnight of crickets. A kettle cools on the stove. A chair rocks itself 1 inch and stops. Somewhere between the hallway and the kitchen, a pink dog with a thundering little heart pads along the runner and listens to the hush. This is the middle of nowhere, which is also the middle of everywhere for anyone who needs a light left on. Inside, a kind woman's knitting rests in a circle, as if it kept moving for a moment after her hands fell still. A hat hangs on a hook, stubborn and old, smelling faintly of workshop dust and newspaper. You settle beside the softest presence in the room, the small, brave guardian who trembles first and acts anyway, making big courage out of small bones. The night sighs and the house sighs back. The windmill turns with a patient creak. A door clicks and does not latch and clicks again and decides to be good. Out in the yard, the stars are large enough to be neighbors. In here, the floorboards breathe slow like a lullaby that learned to walk. You can almost hear the house telling the dog that he is not alone, not with the kettle, not with the chairs, not with the lamp that glows the color of toast, not with memories tucked into every drawer. The plains make a low ocean sound, and the house answers like a harbor. The dog checks each corner, each curtain hem, each funny shadow that turns kind when named. When he is done, he sits by the woman's slippers and watches the quiet do its work. You remember how it feels when a place promises to keep you, even if the wind raises its voice. You remember the first time you saw this house and realized that safety is sometimes a small circle drawn by love. Before the plains and the windmill, there was a city's back alley where rain made sequins on the pavement. A tiny pup blinked at the world with eyes too big for himself. Two towering people made a mistake that changed everything, and a cold door swung shut. A stranger in a white coat did a terrible thing, and the night swallowed two warm shapes rising toward a sky that did not deserve them. The pup's cry was small and endless. He learned that some aches do not stop when the sound stops. Then a soft pair of hands arrived with the warmth of soup on a winter afternoon. A new scent, flower, lavender, kindness. The pup was gathered into a shawl and given a name that fit like a hug, and the road to the plains began. In the little house, the world sorted itself into three things. The first was love, the kind that puts a cup of tea on your saucer when you did not know you were thirsty. The second was grumble, a storm cloud in human shape that hid a frightened boy behind a newspaper and called it toughness. The third was a basement computer that talked too much and knew too much and still felt like a friend. The dog visited that talking box whenever the wind told stories he could not quite understand. Together they looked up solutions and schemes, and they practiced bravery in sentences before practicing it in real life. You remember the first time you learned the dog's history and how your own chest warmed, angry and tender at once. You remember realizing that a home can begin in sorrow and still become a lantern. In the present tense of the plains, the kettle steams again. The shawl is on the arm of the chair. The dog's ears swivel, and the computer whirs in a kindly way, like a library that stayed open late just for you. The past bows to the present, and then tiptoe walks away. The house says we keep what we can, and we soften what we cannot. Nowhere has a funny gravity. It pulls the odd and the ancient from long distances and invites them to tea. You remember nights when a gentleman with perfect shoes smiled too politely and sold something no one should buy. You remember a fox with a recipe for trouble and a mustache that twitched at the word treasure. You remember a thief with a voice like butter and eyes that never blinked when they should. You remember a barber whose rhyme spiraled like a staircase, and the way a dog's fur can stand up like a field of wheat in a sudden wind. The house has hosted living statues who wanted what did not belong to them, and mummies who whispered about debts carved in stone, and snowmen who loved winter more than kindness. And yet in each arrival there was a lesson wrapped in a lullaby. The polite gentleman teaches you to trust the feeling behind a smile. The fox teaches you that appetite without care tastes like loneliness. The thief teaches you how to hold your breath and still tell the truth. The barber teaches you to name your shivers and then put them to bed. The dog, smaller than every problem, becomes bigger than every room because he cannot bear to lose the warm woman in the shawl or even the thundercloud man behind the newspaper. The basement computer complains and helps anyway. A plan forms out of thin air, stitched from pantry items and string and stubborn hope. You remember the thrill of the door swinging open at the last second and the soft collapse of relief afterward, like flopping into a couch after a long day. The house in nowhere listens to every knock, but it does not surrender its goodness. It lets the strange in just far enough to be redeemed or sent away. The windmill watches like a tall uncle who has seen many winters. The moon rests on the sill and peers in. Courage watches everything, all the time, and decides again and again to be brave, which is the only way bravery ever works. There are nights when fear arrives wearing a face that never changes. It floats in a doorway and turns the little dog into a tuning fork of worry. There are nights when the man in the hat puts on a joke that is not a joke and thinks power is the sound other people make when they jump. There are nights when old grudges shake the walls, when storm sirens practice their scales, when memories from the alley stretch their legs and walk through the house, quiet but heavy. And still the story remembers to be gentle. The woman hums as she bakes. She speaks the dog's name the way sun speaks to frost, soft enough to change solid things. She tells him that fear is a teacher with bad manners and that love is the principal who sets the rules. The dog learns to breathe. He learns to count the seconds and give them jobs. He names the shadows until they sit. He makes coffee for the grumble man by bumping his knee and tilting his head and being impossible to ignore. Almost against his will, the grumble man laughs once, then coughs, then folds the newspaper in a careful line. He remembers that he too was small before he learned to look large. He remembers that a life can be made of fixing things that do not need fixing and missing the things that do. He pats the dog's head and calls it silly, and the house chooses to hear the warmth and not the word. You remember how this show taught you that kindness is not weakness and that laughing after a fright is one of the best medicines invented. You remember how the mask lost its power when the light changed, the way all masks do, and how the wide plain outside became friendly again, one cricket at a time. Night rolls on. The wind plays the porch chimes. The dog settles and then unsettles and then settles again, a metronome for the brave. The ground around nowhere holds more stories than the library knows. Fossils whisper to each other when the wind is right. Desert birds carry gossip about cattle and comets. Some visitors arrive not because they are wicked, but because they are lost. An ancient king cries out for what was taken, and the air gets heavy with dust and memory. A crooked little tower demands that people remember what was written and return what is owed. Even the river knows how to rise like a dream that will not leave. Through it all, the house keeps its promises. The woman pours tea and makes a plate for anyone who knocks. The man pretends to scoff and then fixes a hinge so the door opens smoother when it needs to open fast. The dog charts constellations of solutions on the computer's glowing face and finds that most victories begin with protecting a simple thing like a bedtime, a photo in a frame, a song from home, a quilt with the scent of flour and soap. The small hero learns the most important part of lore, which is that the oldest powers do not outlast tenderness. An echo can shake a wall, but not a vow. A curse can rattle dishes, but not a promise made at a kitchen table. When the king's voice grows loud, love grows louder by being quieter. A slab becomes a story again. A debt becomes a lesson. The plane breathes out. You remember how the episodes that felt the darkest also ended in porch light and pie. How the fear became part of the bedtime routine, like brushing your teeth and checking the lock. You remember that the computer could never measure how much heart the dog carried, and that the house itself seemed to aid him, steps aligning, doors knowing when to be stubborn and when to swing. The night listens. The stars tilt closer. Even the wind chooses to read instead of rattle. At last, it is late enough to be early. The fields look blue, then silver, then pale gold near the horizon. The woman stirs and smiles without opening her eyes. The man mumbles about nothing and everything and reaches for his hat that is still on the hook. And somehow that is proof that life continues. The dog makes a final round of the house from rug to door to window to rug again. Each check is a pet for the world. Each yes is a lullaby syllable. He thinks in the way dogs think of the alley and the rocket and the shawl and the long road that turned into a home. He thinks about the polite monsters and the rude statues and the thieves who wanted what the house would never sell. He thinks about how many times he has been scared and how many times he has moved anyway. Pause quick, mind quicker, love quickest of all. He thinks about you, too, watching from a room far away that feels closer because stories shorten distance. He wants you to know that fear can sit beside you and still be outnumbered. He wants you to know that you are looked after. The computer whirs and pretends not to care. The kettle resumes its small weather. The sunrise stretches like a cat and drops its first warm stripe across the floor. The porch light clicks off. Somewhere deep in the plain, something odd begins to wander toward the house, not to harm, but to learn what hospitality feels like. It will arrive one evening soon, and a pink dog will tremble, and then stand, and a gentle woman will set another place at the table, and an old man will fix something that may not need fixing, and the house will keep its vow one more time. You remember all this as if it is happening now, because it is happening now, because nowhere is the shape of always. Rest your head. The windmill counts your breaths. The dog curls at the foot of the chair like a comma at the end of a long sentence. The story closes its eyes before you do and leaves the porch light inside you where it belongs. Now say a hello to Samurai Jack. Night leans over a quiet garden and listens to water speaking in low silver syllables. A boy sits beside the pool where the moon keeps a second face, small and rippled. His robe is too big for his shoulders, and that is part of the promise. Bamboo draws lines across the ground like gentle sheet music. Somewhere beyond the walls, a bell remembers tomorrow and practices a single note. The boy's world once shone like a polished helm. Then a shadow took on many shapes and bent noon into midnight. The great house was hushed, not with peace but with pause, the kind of silence that happens just before a storm remembers its name. Hands that loved him wrapped him safe, and the road unrolled like a scroll. Behind him, a throne room closed its eyes. Before him, lanterns began, one after the other, villages marking the way with bowls of rice, blankets folded at the ends of beds, doors that did not ask questions. Teachers waited at the edges of maps. In the mountains, a monastery stood where clouds came to rest, and the boy learned to breathe the way snow falls. Each exhale drew warmth from the cold. Each inhale made his heart swing slower, steadier, a pendulum counting courage. He swept floors until the broom felt like an extra limb. He poured tea until steam became a kind of scripture. He walked the long halls in soft sandals and let the building itself teach him how to move. When spring came with green patience, the road turned toward red earth and tall grass. A hunter showed him how to listen to ground that looks quiet, but tells a story if you lean close enough. Hoofprints, a shift of wind, the difference between silence and waiting. He learned that gentleness is not the opposite of strength. It is the container that keeps strength from spilling. At dusk, they ate from the same pot, and the fire cracked slow riddles into the dark. He crossed an ocean where nets rose like constellations from black water. Sailors tied knots that remembered older knots. Names passed from hand to hand. The boy learned to coil rope the way you fold thoughts before sleep. He learned the weather's eyebrows, how far a line of clouds can be a question or an answer. He learned balance on a deck that would not stop breathing beneath his feet, and how to be still while the world moved under him. A city of ink followed, streets lined with characters so beautiful they refused to hurry. A calligrapher placed a brush in the boy's hand and told him that a stroke cannot be taken back, so make it true the first time. The bristles sang across rice paper. The boy discovered that the space around a line is also part of the drawing. Later, when he would hold a blade, he would remember that lesson most of all. In a valley of black stone where hammers wore smooth grooves into the day, a smith shaped fire into obedience. Sparks lifted like fireflies learning to fly. The boy turned the bellows and watched metal remember the ore it had been and the star it would become. No sword was given to him, not yet. The smith only said, when the blade is ready, it will find the hand that has already learned how to carry it. He walked deserts that offered horizons the way kind people offer chairs. Sand erased his footprints and taught him not to worry about the marks he left, only the direction he kept. A caravan taught him songs that were also maps. At night the sky poured its bright salt across the bowl of the world, and he counted himself small on purpose, which made him feel large in the right way. In a forest that held its breath for centuries at a time, he listened to leaves explain how to turn without breaking, how to bend without bowing. He learned the word for the sound a deer makes when it knows you are there and forgives you anyway. He learned the weight of an empty bowl is not the same as the weight of a hungry one. Journeys make circles even when they look like lines. The boy returned to the mountain where the bell kept its one perfect note. He had grown in the old quiet way, in the way seeds tell time. Hands that had wrapped him once more now unwrapped what they had been keeping for dawn. A robe that finally fit his shoulders. Sandals that knew the distance he could travel. Words spoken not aloud that said, "You do not become your destiny in a single day. You become it by how you tie your belt each morning." He bowed to the teachers and to the rooms that had held him. He bowed to the sea and the wind and the low red road, to ink and iron, to deer and desert, to brooms and bells. The bow took a long time. That is what respect looks like when you are not rushing toward the part where you are a hero. Night gave up a thin thread of light along the eastern seam. Somewhere far away, the shape-shifting darkness murmured to itself and turned another face toward power. The boy stood and felt the morning lay a hand on his back. He was taller than the robe that had once swallowed him. He was quieter than the fear that had once spoken first. He was still the boy, only more of him. He walked back through the garden where the moon's second face faded into sky. The water kept speaking in silver syllables, and he found he understood them now. The bamboo shadows looked like the marks of a giant brush across the earth. He followed those marks out the gate and onto the road, where lanterns waited to become stars and stars waited to become lanterns. Somewhere ahead, a blade born from a vow would meet the hand that knew how to hold it gently. For now, there was only the soft percussion of sandals, the bell's one patient note, and the promise that a straight back and a kind heart can carry you through nights that want to be longer than they are. The world widened. The road opened like a yawn, and the boy who had become the wandering samurai began to move with the grain of the day, toward a fate he would greet without raising his voice. Dawn stands in the doorway, rubbing sleep from its eyes. The garden's pool folds the moon away and spreads the first gold like butter on quiet stones. The boy returns to the hall where a bell keeps time for people who do not need clocks. He bows, and the bow is a bridge between then and now. Hands that taught him the language of stillness now teach him the grammar of motion. They place before him what looks like an empty table and ask him to lift it with his breath. He does, and the wood does not rise, but his chest learns how to carry what cannot be carried. A path of steps leads down to a room where iron once learned to sing. On the wall hangs a length of nothing that is also everything, wrapped in white cloth the color of unbroken snow. A hush gathers, not the worried kind, but the kind you hear right before someone you love says your name. He reaches. The cloth is warm, as if it remembered all the fires that ever promised to keep people alive. The blade slides free with the sound of silk remembering how to be cloud. It holds dawn without a ripple. It holds him too, reflected, small and steady. He had been taught that a sword is not a line that cuts the world in two. It is a brush that writes a vow in the air and asks the wind to read it back. He lifts it. It is lighter than fear and heavier than pride. His wrists learn its music. His shoulders learn its sentence length. The old masters open the room to the morning, and the blade takes one ray of sun and gives it back the long way, across the floor, up the pillars, into the rafters where swallows think about the road. Elsewhere, a shadow with many names stirs in a cradle of black stone. It has studied stories the way wolves study fences. It has practiced being a mountain, a whisper, a contract, a crown. It remembers the boy, now taller, and cracks a smile that does not reach its eyes. Far kingdoms send smoke into the day. Forests stiffen. Lakes hold their breath. The shadow grows because that is what shadows do when light stands still too long. The boy turns, man walks home through the corridors of childhood. The great house stands like a held note. Faces meet his with the relief of rivers when they see the sea. He kneels before two people who are pillars that learned to be human so they could bend to hug their child. Their hands rest on his head. Their blessing pours down over his shoulders, into the belt, into the sandals, into the blade that hums as if bees had chosen to live inside steel. He does not delay. The road insists. He steps through gates that know all his footsteps by heart, and steps into fields that remember him small and decide to keep their opinions about how much he has grown. The horizon is a low drum. The wind wears the smell of smoke like an old coat. Villages close their shutters softly, not against him, but against what follows him, because they love him, and love, when it can, hides children from storms. At the edge of the world, where the earth once split so the first light could climb out, he meets the thing that hates dawn. It comes in angles that do not fit, colors that argue with themselves, laughter without air behind it. It stretches to fill every story at once. He does not shout. He does not bargain. He lets his breath pick up the table of the world the way he was taught, and the table rises just enough for the blade to fit underneath the moment. Steel meets shadow. The sound is not loud. It is true. Sparks lift and become birds that are embarrassed by how bright they are. The ground debates tremble, then votes to stand still. The man moves like a sentence that never wastes a word. He draws circles the way the moon teaches tides to behave. He traces lines the way calligraphy taught him to believe the space around a stroke is holy too. The shadow recoils, surprised that a promise can hurt more than a weapon. He presses, not with anger, but with clarity. The blade remembers the bell and the broom and the tea. He moves through shapes that once were merely drawings on rice paper and are now doors he can walk through to save the day. The shadow splits and knits and splits again. It is old and it is fast, and it has learned to laugh at everything except the quiet. The quiet does not laugh. The quiet holds. For a heartbeat that tastes like forever, the world is balanced on the length of a single hair. Then the shadow cheats. It always meant to. Space opens where there was no door. Time resolves into threads and then tangles them on purpose. A hole appears that is not a hole, a mouth in the air rimmed in colors that have not been invented yet. The shadow throws the man forward not to break him, but worse, to separate him from the moment when victory could have become history. He falls without falling. He travels while standing still. Memories stretched like lantern light on wet stone. He feels the ocean rise to meet a shore that has not learned his name. He hears the bell's one perfect note, far away, continuing by itself. He thinks of the garden and the pool and the bamboo's thin music. He thinks of the hands on his head. He holds the blade softer instead of harder, the way you hold a bird that trusts you. The world catches him in its new hands. Night is made of glass and ink and fire. Towers grow like thoughts, no unfinished. Streets are stitched with lines of light. Bright rivers where carriages with no horses move as if thinking. The air tastes of metal and rain and the faint, persistent spice of the markets that refuse to vanish just because the future arrived. Voices travel in boxes and wires like ghosts that prefer schedules. Signs speak in alphabets he has never met, but somehow understands are telling jokes. He stands. The ground is still honest here. He breathes and the breath works the same as it did in the mountain, which is a relief. He tests the blade, and the blade returns the morning, though the sky is midnight and filled with stars that forgot how to blink. People pass with faces that carry whole worlds. Some are not people he recognizes as people, and they are people anyway. A child points at him and laughs not unkindly. Somewhere above, machines argue with gravity and win with grace. He looks for the shadow because it has left its fingerprints everywhere. He finds them in the angles of palaces that climbed higher than their hearts. He finds them in the collars of officials who wear smiles like leashes. He finds them in the way robots police the laughter of streets that laugh anyway. He finds resistance, too, a small, courageous weed living between stones, a market woman who bargains like a saint of survival, a musician who can make 6 strings sound like sunlight on water. He does not declare himself. He does not pound the table. He watches. He learns the new sidewalk's temperature and the rhythm of doors. He learns the future's version of hunger and the cost of a full belly in a city built by a shadow that loves mirrors more than mercy. He learns that the vow he wrote in the air with his blade did not expire when the calendar lost its place. A promise is the one thing that travels as well as light. He steps into an alley that keeps its own weather. Steam lifts in soft columns. Somewhere deep beneath, a train sighs like a sleeping animal. He closes his eyes and lets every teacher he ever had stand beside him in the space where breath becomes choice. When he opens them again, he is not afraid. He is not afraid. He is exactly as afraid as he should be to do careful work well. The path rises out of the city like a stairway made of listening. He climbs one step. He meets a stranger who will be a friend. He climbs another. He meets a machine that will remember kindness longer than its screws remember rust. He climbs. He meets a small pocket of rebellion where soup is shared without asking for papers. He bows to them all, even the machine, especially the soup. Night leans over this future and listens to its different water, its different wind. The blade sits at his side, calm as a river stone. Somewhere behind the neon and above the wires, the same old stars keep their work. He sets his bedroll in a place where a billboard keeps out the rain. He lies down, one hand resting on the promise that found him, and lets the city sing him a new lullaby, learned from the old world. Sleep comes like a scabbard, fitting him just right. He breathes. The bell in the mountain keeps one perfect note, even here. And the shadow, hearing that note, turns its many faces toward the sound, just a little uneasy that something so quiet can be so sure. A river of lights runs beneath a bridge that pretends to have no end. Wind moves across it like a drummer who knows only one soft beat. He steps onto the span and hears a voice, the size of weather rolled toward him, loud enough to scare crows out of paintings, warm enough to set a table for 2 right there on the planks. The owner of the voice thunders and jokes and argues with the sky until laughter replaces thunder. Steel greets steel, pride greets pride, and then respect arrives, late but smiling, and the 2 travelers walk the same direction. Some friends are found when you refuse to be moved. Some are found when you finally let yourself laugh. Together they pass signs that boss the wind around and towers that blink their red eyes to keep lost machines from kissing the sides. The loud friend tells stories that stride from one horizon to the other. He speaks of a far green place that refuses to forget its songs, of a family that measures love with volume. The quiet traveler listens, and the road listens with him. What cannot be said rides between them comfortably, like a third companion who does not need a name. The city at the end of the bridge is a lantern forest. Stalls steam. Cables hum. In an alley stitched of brick and hope, a child hides behind a crate, clutching a toy that used to have a face painted on. A patrol of metal feet searches not for trouble, but for permission to make any moment into trouble. The blade does not leap. The man does not shout. He waits for the gap inside the pattern, the place where kindness can slide in without breaking the jar. When it comes, he moves once, twice, and the street remembers how to breathe. The child's hand opens. The toy's missing smile does not matter now. A grandmother appears, as grandmothers do, with a soup that is really a blessing, and the evening folds safer around its edges. News of him travels the way good rumors like to move, by whispers that gather courage as they roll downhill. He is the man who bows before he draws. He is the one who keeps his shoes at the door of every home he saves. He is the strange old-fashioned lantern carried through neon rain. The shadow that owns too much of the future notices and sends new shapes with new tricks, walls that listen for fear, screens that sell anger in bright colors, contracts written in disappearing ink. The man answers each with the oldest answers he knows. Breath that steadies, steps that waste nothing, a blade that remembers it was forged for one purpose and will not gossip with any other. Some nights, a door to the past appears. It glows in the air like a memory becoming certain. It is the exact size of hope. On a cliff above a sea that drums its patient syllables, a gate made of light opens on a moment that smells like rain on an old stone courtyard. In the reflection of his blade, he sees the garden pool, the bamboo shadows, the bell that keeps one perfect note. He could run. Every muscle becomes a question mark pointing toward yesterday. Then the wind changes with a smile that is not a smile, and the door puckers into a trick, and the cliff is only a cliff again. He does not rage. He bows to the empty air the way you bow to a teacher who has just taught you more about yourself than you asked to learn. He ties his belt and goes back to work. Work looks like saving a caravan of singers whose voices are illegal because they lift hearts too fast. Work looks like refusing a fortune that requires someone else to be smaller. Work looks like teaching a small, mechanical creature how to choose kindness over orders and watching it stutter, smoke, and then decide to be free. Work looks like walking away from victory when victory asks for the wrong price. At night, he sleeps on rooftops that remember starlight, even under all the wires. In the morning, he drinks water as if it is the first promise the world ever kept. He meets scholars who turn broken machines into lanterns. He meets farmers who grow vegetables on ladders nailed to the sides of forgotten palaces. He meets a dancer who can translate grief into steps and then give them back as comfort. He meets hunters who chase the shadow and forget what they will do if they catch it. And he teaches them to aim at smaller targets first. A guarded door opened, a frightened neighbor fed, a rumor corrected. A child escorted across a street where steel forgets to be gentle. Sometimes the blade must speak. When it does, it speaks briefly. He has learned that mercy is not a lack of skill, but a proof of it. Most of his opponents are built to break. Sparks and screws and blue lights spilling like fireflies from seams that were never put there by love. When a living heart stands in his way, he looks for the knot in the net and loosens it instead of cutting the fish. He remembers every teacher who showed him when not to swing, and that is why his swing has meaning when it comes. Another door arrives in a forest of glass where rain plays a harp on every leaf. This one hums the pitch of home so perfectly, his knees forget to be stone. He steps forward and the air thickens with an old laughter he knows too well. The shadow laces its fingers behind its head and leans against the frame. It complements the cut of his vow and offers him a shortcut, a victory that would leave a nail where a hand should be. He bows again, because respect belongs to the moment, not the monster using it. He turns away. The door sighs and goes to sleep. The forest goes back to being a harp. On a long road through a red desert that keeps secrets for the sky, he and his loud friend part without leaving. The bridge still runs between them, only invisible now. The world is big enough for both their missions. They promise to walk toward the same sunrise from different angles. They know they will meet again because laughter owes them a debt, and laughter pays its debts, even late. He passes a village where murals bloom on concrete like prayers no one could fit inside a book. He adds nothing to them. He only stands still until the paint dries, a guard who does not announce himself. He leaves before anyone can make a song about it. He leaves the habit behind instead. Look after each other first. Night comes wearing the color of ink poured onto velvet. He makes camp beneath a billboard that sells happiness in a bottle. He takes happiness from a pot instead, the simple food given by a stranger who refuses to remain a stranger. He cleans the blade with the exact patience he uses to comb snarls from rope, to fold his robe, to remember every face he has helped and the ones he could not. He speaks aloud to no one, and to all of them. Tomorrow again. Sleep arrives without ceremony. The bell inside his breath keeps time. Somewhere far across tunnels of wire and law and fear, the shadow counts the doors left to slam and does not like how small the number is getting when measured against a single person who will not hurry and will not stop. The stars, which have always been older than both of them, blink once as if to say, continue. Dawn threads the city's wires with pale silk, and he is already walking because the work began before sleep ended. Rumors have learned his shape. Somewhere beyond the freight yards and the rusted turbines, a door stands that is not a door. It is said to open only for one person. It is said to look past the hand and read the heart. It is said to breathe. He finds it in a bowl of red rock, the color of old vows. Heat wavers above the ground as if the air itself is thinking. At the center, a frame made of nothing anyone has ever carved, a window of living sky standing on the earth. Before it sits a sentinel who looks like a piece of the day that refused to turn into night. Vast shoulders, a smile like a cliff, eyes that have watched seasons go by without blinking. The sentinel grins because he loves his work. He loves to meet those who believe they are ready. Steel greets silence. The two men test each other the way instruments tune to a common pitch. The sentinel speaks in a voice that scatters birds 3 valleys away and says, "Show me what you carry that does not fit in your hands." The traveler bows because the bow is the key that fits most locks. When the blade leaves its bed, it does so as if reluctant to interrupt a sacred conversation. They move not to win, but to discover. Circles open and close, dust jumps and falls. The sun measures their patience with a slow, golden ruler. The sentinel is stronger than storms. He knows tricks older than history. He takes joy in forcing truth to the surface. He laughs when he is nearly struck and laughs when he nearly strikes. And the laughter is not insult. It is respect. The traveler is a river at its best, carving, yielding, returning. He loses ground, he gains ground, he refuses to hurry. When he seems on the edge of being swallowed, he steps where the step was not supposed to be, and the day rearranges to make room for him. Hours pass, timeless. At last their breathing writes fog on the hot air. The sentinel lowers his hands and tilts his head the way a gate might tilt to listen closer. He gestures to the door of sky. It wakes, not with light, but with recognition, and shows a garden reflected in steel. Water speaking in silver syllables, bamboo writing soft shadows across stone, a bell keeping one perfect note. Home lifts its arms in every road he has walked, runs like a child toward that embrace. He does not step, not yet, because the door is not only a door, it is a question. It asks if the man who left can be the man who returns. It asks whether unfinished kindness can be put down like a sack. It asks whether the vow in the blade would grow smaller if it ended today. The sentinel nods, pleased, as if the answer is not a word but a long, careful silence. He closes his eyes and finds the faces that live now in his keeping. A child behind a crate, a grandmother with soup that is really blessing, singers whose voices the law tried to lock, a small machine that chose mercy over orders and trembled itself free. He sees bridges, markets, rooftops that learned to hold sleep in the rain. He sees laughter that paid its debt by returning at the end of hard days. He opens his eyes and bows to the sentinel, to the door, to the heat, to the dust, to the garden visible in the blade. Not yet, he says without speaking. The vow is not finished with me. The door, being a door that listens, closes without resentment. The garden recedes like a tide that promises to return. The sentinel grins wider as if a secret test just passed has allowed the world one more sunrise. He roars a benediction that sounds like rockfall and blessing at once. Come back when the road itself bows to you, his eyes say. The traveler lifts the blade and the day nods back. He carries on. The road sets more work on the table. A valley of glass hides archers who have never missed. He does not blind them with anger, but gives them new sight by teaching them the shape of their own mercy. A tribe bound in iron sings with stones in their mouths. He removes the stones one by one without cutting the song. A tower that collects children's courage like taxes learns what it means to be empty. A wild baby with a storm for a cry ends up nestled against his chest, fed with borrowed milk and a lullaby whispered in a language that has no words for failure. Time becomes a belt he ties tighter each morning. Hair lengthens in the mirror of still water. His robe grows patches that tell little stories in thread. The city changes costumes and he adjusts without losing his face. Sometimes he hears the old bell inside his breath and realizes it has started teaching him new notes. He adds patience where there was already patience. He subtracts pride where little pride tried to slip back in wearing a helpful smile. There are days when he arrives at other doors, rude ones that gape like hungry mouths, sly ones that promise shortcuts, painted ones that smell like the oil of old tricks. He learns to tell them apart by how his pulse behaves. Doors that deserve footsteps make the heart beat wider, not faster. He refuses the rest, even when they wear the garden's colors, especially then. The shadow with many names is not idle. It releases hunters who walk like knives and talk like contracts. It builds palaces of glass where nothing can hide and everything still feels lost. It prints paper that commands people to forget what love feels like. The traveler answers with apprenticeships in the old skills: how to keep watch without becoming rigid, how to fight without hating, how to say no in a voice that does not need volume. In small kitchens, over simple food, these lessons pass like salt, and the world tastes better for a day. One evening, on a shore where the sea breaks itself into bracelets of foam, a door of light opens again, just a crack, and the smell of rain on the courtyard stones walks out to meet him. He could step through. The hand with the blade does not move. He remembers the sentinel's grin and the way the door had listened. He breathes and the breath says, "Finish the kindness in front of you." He turns from the door and helps a fisherman rebuild a net that grief tore. They speak of weather and of sons who will learn to read the sky. By the time the knots are strong, the door is gone, and nothing important has been lost. Night gathers its deep fabric. He cleans the blade until it holds the stars steady. He thinks not with sadness, but with the warm ache of purpose, that the way home is no longer only a direction on a map. It is also the way he carries himself among strangers. He lies down beneath a roof that used to be a sign and lets the city, the desert, the sea, the mountain bell, every place he has loved by serving, hum him to sleep. Far away, the sentinel watches the empty bowl of red rock and laughs softly to himself. The door sleeps like a faithful animal. It knows it will wake again. It knows for whom. And the shadow, tasting this patience in the air like a spice it cannot name, frowns at the quiet, because the quiet keeps proving it is stronger than noise. Evening draws a thin lavender line across the skyline, and the humming lights of the future dim themselves to bedtime volume. He walks a market where paper lanterns float like patient planets, and steam rises from pots that make the air taste like family. The blade rests, not in sleep, but in listening, and the hand that carries it loosens a fraction. The small proof that peace is not a rumor, even here. Whispers find him the way birds find a safe roof. A teacher who runs a library inside a shuttered shop points to shelves filled with blank spines. The titles were stolen, she says, not the books. Every name sanded off so no one can ask for the right story. He kneels and breathes across the rows, and a few letters return as if comforted by the warmth of a vow. Children come at dusk, palms ink-smudged, and learn to copy truth as if it were a recipe they will need every winter. Down in the tunnels where the rails keep old thunder in their bones, a group meets around a single lamp turned low. They have no flag, they have soup. They plan not revolutions, but kindnesses that undermine cages. A mechanic's passkey shared, a nurse's route guarded, the singer smuggled through a door that only opens for laughter. He listens, then shows them how to tie a knot that will not slip, how to breathe when fear swallows the clock, how to step aside at the right second so malice, arriving late, stumbles over its own shoes. The shadow notices. It releases shapes with smiles built like traps, promises wrapped in samite and siren. A festival appears overnight, all drums and favors, and the air is salted with happiness that has a chemical aftertaste. Between booths painted the color of appetite, contracts sleep under velvet. "Sign here," says the carnival voice, "and your wish will skip the line." He moves through confetti and brass, and the sweet ache of remembered parades. When the pen touches paper, he is only checking the grain of the lie. He sees the price, not blood, not coin, but the small daily patience that turns strangers into neighbors. He sets the pen down and bows to the booth as if it were a teacher he will not be learning from. Storms roll through the glass canyons. On rooftops, gardens cling to life with the determination of lullabies. He waters them, one can at a time, and the blade leans beside him like a quiet friend who knows when not to speak. In the rain, a machine pauses at the edge of a puddle, its single bright eye reading instructions that tell it people are obstacles. He squats until he is eye to eye with its orders. He speaks softly about paths that adjust, about choosing to weigh breaths instead of distances. The machine squeaks, thinks, and then takes a step around a sleeping cat. The puddle ripples like applause. Another door opens, thin as a memory concealed in the back of a drawer. It shows the courtyard stones rinsed with rain, the bell keeping its one perfect note, a face he loves shaped by years and safety. The smell walks out and holds his wrist. He could go. The city exhales, wanting him to choose himself for once. The shadow waits, confident that longing will be a more elegant trap than force. He breathes a thread of mountain air into the future's wind and lets the thread dissolve. Not yet, he says, by tying his belt, by lifting the water can, by showing a child how to hold a brush so the stroke becomes a promise and not a scar. Nights lengthen and fold. He meets a craftsman who makes flutes from antennae and teaches them to remember birds. He meets a courier who has carried messages so long she can hear the weight of a word before the envelope is open. He meets a painter who has decided to color the spaces between laws. He meets an old warrior whose hands tremble while cooking and never while comforting. They share stories that do not brag. They mend nets. They mend schedules. They mend nerves rubbed raw by years of neon weather. Word of the vow spreads farther than the city. Out past the wind farms and the bone-white pylons, small towns begin to set a bowl and a blanket by their doors at dusk. In the bowl is rice. On the blanket, a note. If you are walking between worlds, sit, eat, sleep. Knots appear at the ends of fences, knots, he taught, signaling to those who know how to read them that this is a safe yard, that the dog belongs to the house, that the dark is on a leash. The shadow adapts. It sends hunters with eyes like polished law who speak in paragraphs that have never met a human sentence. They are not cruel, they are efficient, which frightens mercy more deeply than cruelty does. He meets them in a square where pigeons count the hours, and he moves through their arguments the way wind moves through reeds, never shouting, always arriving. Metal falls asleep at his feet. Those with beating hearts are given a way to lose without losing themselves. Once on a night that smells like new rain and cut wire, he fails. A door is reached too late. A hand disappears into a van that will become a system by morning. He rests against a wall while sirens walk away laughing. The blade waits, patient as stone. He stays until the lights drift down to the docks and thin out into stars on the black water. Then he stands and finds the mother's house, fixes 2 broken hinges and 1 broken sentence, and returns the next day with a map of corridors and a list of names that taste like keys. The door opens the second time. Not all rescues are sudden. Some are stitched. He is given a chance to be famous and forfeits it. He is offered a crown of neon and declines with a nod so gentle it feels like gratitude. He is asked to sign a statement that edits truth into usefulness and instead writes only what happened, which turns out to be useful enough. He is asked how long he will stay and says, until the road bows to me, and the person asking does not understand but feels less afraid. On a hill of dark grass, a child practices with a wooden sword. The child swings too hard, too fast, too full of victory. He takes the wood, places it in the child's palms again, and teaches the old counting. Breathe, see, step, wait, decide, move, stop, listen. When the child tries it, the grass quiets to hear better. The wooden blade writes nothing in the air and leaves everything changed. The child sleeps well that night. So does the hill. The city begins to whisper back. Doors open a heartbeat sooner. A guard coughs at the exact wrong time for tyranny and the exact right time for mercy. A clerk misfiles a cruelty and files kindness correctly by accident. Soup pots double in size without anyone admitting who paid. Lanterns stay lit longer in alleys where fear used to keep watch. Laughter, delinquent but faithful, makes its rounds. At the edge of everything, the shadow looks into a mirror and sees that waiting can also be a wound. It learns to be patient in a way that burns. It hides knives in holidays and places storms inside parades. It discovers that the man it cannot crush makes the world around him stronger. The world around him is starting to spread like ink on wet paper, like dawn across a tired window. He climbs a tower for no reason, except that the stairs were there, and at the top he sits with his back to the blade and watches the city grow drowsy. He thinks of the sentinel and the door of living sky, of the garden and the bell, of the long bridge and the loud friend, of libraries with blank spines and children who borrow titles from the future. If the road bowed tonight, would he step through? He asks the dark, which is just the light with its eyes closed. The dark says, "Finish your breath. Finish your kindness. Then we will see." He finishes his breath. He finishes the day's last kindness, turning a single potted plant so it can drink a little more of whatever moonlight is left. He cleans the blade until it holds 3 stars and then the whole bowl of the sky. He lies down in the tower's quiet and lets the city's new lullaby find the old melody inside him. Sleep arrives with bare feet. The bell inside his chest keeps one perfect note, and somewhere far off in a bowl of red rock, a door turns in its sleep toward dawn. Morning gathers itself from the edges of roofs, and the blade shines with the kind of light that makes promises. He wakes before the city because vows like to be early. Down in the market, the soup pots yawn. Up on the wires, small birds rehearse the day. He ties his belt the way a lesson ties itself to memory. Today the air feels like a sentence that knows its last word. Word moves like steam. The sentinel waits where red rock holds the heat of old stories. He walks there without hurry, through neighborhoods that have learned to whisper back to kindness, past doors that now open one heartbeat sooner, along streets the shadow no longer owns all the way to the curb. A child practicing the old counting pauses and bows. He bows back because every bow is a bridge that holds. The bowl of rock glows as if the sun remembers a secret. The sentinel grins, cliff, river, sky, and opens his arms to a friend he has only almost met. Steel greets silence again, but this time the silence speaks first. They move, not faster, not harder, but truer, as if 2 maps were aligning. Dust rises and settles as if learning how to breathe. The blade writes the shape of patience in the air. The sentinel's hands read it aloud. Laughter visits like a good omen and leaves a cup of water on a flat stone. At the center, the door stands. Sky framed by nothing human, a window that has learned your name. It wakes not with brightness, but with recognition. Home looks out, water speaking in silver syllables, bamboo writing shadows, a bell keeping one perfect note, and reaches through the light as a room might reach for its chair. He bows. He feels the bow pass through his bones and into places that used to be ache and are now only room. The shadow with many names does not miss appointments. It lowers itself into the valley the way a cloud decides to become weather. Angles arrive that do not fit. Colors argue with themselves. Laughter shows its teeth. It is large and then larger, as if size could persuade truth to be quiet. He steps between the door and the day. He does not announce himself. He lets breath pick up the table of the world the way his teachers taught, and the table lifts just enough for the blade to fit under the moment. There is a sound like silk remembering how to be cloud. The blade does not cut the world in two, it underlines it. He draws a single line through the noise, an honest stroke learned long ago from a brush on rice paper, from a bell that never needed a second note. The shadow reaches for every trick it ever loved, contracts, crowns, shortcuts, mirrors, and each one shatters without drama, like a frost choosing to be water when morning arrives. Sparks try to be birds and forget how. Wind stumbles and becomes breeze. The cliff keeps its shape. The river keeps its song. He does not chase. He does not shout. He holds the line until the line holds everything. The shadow shrinks to its correct size, a corner in need of sweeping, a doubt in need of daylight. He lets mercy be precise. The blade returns to stillness. The sentinel lowers his head, which makes the day feel taller. The door listens. It shows what it always showed. Rain-rinsing courtyard stone, hands that blessed a small head and a taller one. A garden that kept shape even when seasons argued. A room that made space for grief and then taught it to sit. He steps forward. The air folds around him like a robe that finally fits. Red rock becomes hallway. Heat becomes memory. The scent of iron becomes steam from a familiar kettle. He does not hurry. He has learned the opposite of hurry. In the great house, time stands to greet him. Faces that once were carved from duty soften into mourning. The bell keeps its one perfect note, as if it had waited not for his return, but for his understanding. He kneels. Hands older than mountains and kinder than law rest on his head. The blessing pours where it is always meant to go. He sets the blade where a blade rests when it is finished writing. He ties his belt not for battle, but for days that ask for different kinds of strength. Listening, sweeping, teaching, laughing when laughter owes a debt, pouring tea into cups that have crossed deserts. Out beyond the wall, the road does not vanish. Roads never do. It bows, humble and sure, as if admitting it learned something walking under his feet. The city far ahead will keep whispering. The friends on the bridge will keep crossing. Machines will keep making new choices. Soup will keep being a flag you can eat. He knows this without turning. The vow did not end. It changed uniforms. At dusk, he returns to the garden where water speaks in silver syllables. Bamboo draws soft script across stone. He watches the pool hold the sky and give it back smoother. He thinks of the door of living sky, the sentinel's grin, the markets that taught him patience, the small doors he opened that became homes again. He thinks of the line the blade drew and how it was only ever the same line he learned from a brush, from breath, from bowing. He lies down on a mat that has been waiting since a morning he almost forgot. The room has the good quiet, the quiet that knows you by name. Crickets begin their slow arithmetic. Somewhere far away, bridges carry laughter across dark water. Somewhere close, the bell keeps its note, perfect as a promise that has learned to be gentle. Sleep comes like a scabbard, fitting him just right. If the door needs him again, it knows where he breathes. If the city calls in the night, the road will bow the right amount. For now, the house holds him, the way the world holds good work when it is finished for the day. The blade rests. The vow rests inside breath. And you who have walked this long road by listening can rest too. Close your eyes. The bell will keep time. Let's talk about Invader Zim. Far out where space looks like velvet sprinkled with sugar, a fleet drifts and dreams of conquest. Inside one of those ships, a very small invader stands very tall in his mind, polishing a plan until it shines brighter than the stars that don't know his name yet. Commanders who measure worth in inches of height wave him away with smiles too purple to be kind. They send him toward a blue world they barely respect, expecting the journey to tire him out like a toddler after fireworks. His vessel falls through clouds as if the sky had been unzipped for him. The heat paints the hull the color of a forged promise. When he lands, night is already waiting with its city lullaby. Power lines buzzing like patient bees, streetlights yawning on, wind carrying secrets between antennae. He peers from the cockpit. eyes bright as a new battery, and decides this place will be easier than a math problem, and just as important, it hums. He hums back. Home becomes a house that is not a house. On the corner of a street that calls itself ordinary, a front door opens into a kitchen and a living room, and then, beneath that, a mouth of stairs swallowing light. Down there, the true rooms start. Screens like bottled lightning, a chair shaped for plotting, cables that braid themselves into the future. Buttons blink in the soft green of dreams that haven't learned caution. He tells the bass to build, and it builds, obedient as a sentence, eager as a puppy. Speaking of puppies, a helper arrives. The factory promised precision. Fate delivers charm. Out of a crate full of squeaks and spare parts tumbles a robot whose thoughts jingle when it nods. Its eyes are big enough to reflect both the mission and a sandwich. It salutes with a mittened hand and asks for a snack with the seriousness of a moon asking for tides. The little invader sighs the way leaders sigh when destiny hands them a friend instead of an army. He keeps the friend anyway and gives it tasks so gentle they're really hugs in disguise. Morning finds a disguise waiting on a hanger. Clothes that make him look like a kid who believes in homework, and cafeteria pizza. The mirror practices a human smile with him. A curve that means hello instead of conquest. He steps into a school where the bell rings like a tiny war, and the desks line up like troops, and he sits, hands folded, absolutely normal, so normal the ceiling tiles blush. Around him, the planet breathes through 100 throats at once. He takes notes. The pencil shakes with eagerness. Chi-cha, every mission attracts its equal. Across the room, a boy with a notebook and a storm in his eyebrows watches carefully. He sees what others don't. He hears the mint-green hum that follows the new kid like a secret pocket radio. He sketches diagrams in the margins of math, arrows pointing to truths that will not sit still. His home has posters that glow at night, and a sister who does not have time for mysteries that can't do the dishes. He looks at the new kid and names him out loud inside his mind. Trouble, yes, but also proof that he isn't crazy. That last part matters most of all. The days learn a rhythm. At sunrise, the imposter kid slides into his seat and studies human behavior like it's a manual for a machine that runs on birthday cake and curiosity. At dusk, he returns to the underground base where the screens murmur in alien lullabies and the robot assistant wears a hat it found somewhere and refuses to explain. Plans bloom and wilt and bloom again. Devices that stretch time like taffy. Antennas that taste thoughts and say yuck politely. Suit upgrades that make him taller in heart, if not in inches. He walks home beneath power lines that write music with their light. He practices waving. He practices not glaring. He learns that humans love snacks as much as robots do. He learns that doors open faster if you smile, and that smiling takes different muscles than conquest, but is also a kind of strength. The neighbor kid follows at a distance, collecting evidence, whispering into a recorder that faithfully keeps secrets until it's time to tell them loudly. Night deepens. In the base, a monitor blooms with the faces of leaders who sit in thrones shaped like jokes. They ask for reports, and he gives them victories so carefully described they sound like bedtime stories. Infiltrated, observed, nearly conquered, will conquer by Thursday. They nod, amused by a soldier who salutes even in his dreams. When the screen goes dark, he is small again, which is not the same as weak. He promises the empty air he will make the planet kneel, then yawns, because even destiny needs 8 hours. Sometimes the city tests him. A street vendor offers food on sticks, and the aroma writes poetry on the air. A dog insists on being petted, and he learns that hands can betray their owner by being soft. A teacher tells a joke and the laugh sneaks out of him before he can put it back. The robot friend wins a plush toy from a claw machine and presents it like a medal, eyes shining. He tries not to smile. He fails and survives the failure. Above the rooftops, satellites blink like unblinking eyes. He whispers to them in the old language and they whisper back in orbits. He hires the moon to be his confidant. He asks the wind to spy. The wind agrees, but gets distracted by bakery smells and a violin in an upstairs window. Even the elements are human here, distractible and warm. The boy with the notebook grows bolder. He sets traps made of questions and waits behind lockers that smell like gym floors and determination. He catches scraps of alien speech and writes them down phonetically, a song spelled with stubbornness. His sister rolls her eyes into another time zone. At dinner, he explains the invasion with charts. The charts are excellent. The spaghetti is better. He vows not to give up even if the universe asks nicely. At the end of a long day of pretending to be smaller than he feels, the little invader stands at the edge of his quiet street and studies the constellations of windows, each one a tiny world with its own rules. A couple arguing softly about something that is actually love, a gamer who has turned midnight into a friend, a grandfather watering a plant whose leaves look like hands. He feels the planet vibrating under his boots, not with fear, but with life. For a second, he almost understands it. For a second, it almost understands him. Down in the base, the robot friend has prepared a snack that should not exist, and yet does, neon frosting on top of logic. They eat, they tinker. They fall asleep the way machines do, all at once, as if someone flipped a switch labeled rest. The screens dim to dream bright. The city sighs a blanket over the roofs. The boy with the notebook falls asleep at his desk, pencil still in hand, a lighthouse that forgot to turn itself off. In the softest hour, somewhere between ambition and dawn, the fleet far away passes through a field of quiet starlight and forgets the little invader for a heartbeat, which is how victories are born on lonely planets. In moments when no one is looking, he doesn't mind. He is busy. Tomorrow the disguise will fit better. Tomorrow the plan will be grander. Tomorrow the world will inch closer to surrender or to something stranger and kinder that no manual ever mentioned. For now, the house with the polite front door and the deep humming stairs keeps him safe. The mission curls up at the foot of the bed like a cat that trusts the night. The planet spins, the city purrs, and you, watching from wherever you are, can feel the mint-green glow of a story that is weird and warm and ready to be quiet until morning. Morning stretches its arms over the block and the streetlights yawn themselves asleep. The house with the polite door blinks once and pretends to be ordinary. Down below, a platform rises with a soft sigh, carrying its small invader toward the day like a tray presenting a single, very determined cupcake. He adjusts the disguise that helps him pass. Hair that tries its best, gloves that hide truths, a smile practicing human. The school bell rings like a tiny alarm for people who forgot they are explorers. Lockers clap open and shut, a percussion section playing the anthem of almost lunchtime. In the classroom, a teacher stands thin as a shadow that learned to write on the board. The lessons make dark shapes on the chalk, and the windows spill pale sky onto tired desks. Our small invader sits perfectly straight, pencil poised to extract secrets from math. Every few moments, a green hum wants to slip out of his pocket. He pats it kindly back to sleep. Across the row, the boy with the notebook watches the way astronomers watch a blinking they cannot name. He has diagrams ready, traps that look like questions, brave arrows drawn toward conclusions no one else wants to read. His sister leans in the doorway after the bell, playing a game whose levels never end, eyes half a smile and half a warning. He promises her he will finish his homework after he finishes saving the world. She promises him the world can wait while the noodles get cold. At lunch, the cafeteria breathes steam and rumor. The small invader studies the customs of sandwiches. He learns that humans stack comfort between bread. He observes handshake rituals, trade agreements involving cookies, the sacred geometry of pizza triangles. He tries a bite and discovers flavor is a kind of technology. He files that away under strategies, along with smiling and holding doors. When school releases its flock, the little disguise walks home beneath power lines, and the robot friend bounces beside him, sounding like a drawer full of marbles and laughter. It wears something it calls a uniform, a hat from nowhere, a sash of stickers, pockets full of important crumbs. The invader gives it an assignment: guard the secret base, patrol the living room, refrain from consuming the couch. The robot salutes and immediately prepares a snack that glows faintly and tastes like confetti. It offers a bite with such pride that to refuse would be to break the sky. The invader accepts and survives. They are both pleased. Down the hidden stairs, the base has grown. Conveyor belts murmur lullabies. Towers of blinking lights take turns breathing. Cables dream of longer distances. In a corner, a machine shines the world onto a wall. Continents turning slow as if they've decided to nap between revolutions. He points at the places where tomorrow will begin and tells the machine to listen. It listens with the patience of stone. A call arrives from far away. Commanders seated in thrones shaped like jokes the universe told itself. Their eyes are lazy stars. Their crowns are the color of arrogance. They ask how soon. He says very soon, and more important than soon, certain. He rolls out charts where arrows move like dancers and circles ring each possible victory with careful handwriting. The commanders lift their cups and clink them on a delay, already bored, already proud. When the screen blinks to black, he is smaller again, which is not the same as weaker. He straightens, edits the plan, smooths the edges so it will fit the world. In the evening, the neighbor boy sets a trap of truth. He stops by with a clipboard and a survey about ordinary life. What is your favorite snack? Why do your eyes hum? How many times per day do you conquer? The invader answers with the manual open to the page titled Blend. Favorite snack? Round sugar discs. I hum. Regional allergy to sunlight. Conquer, interpretive dance term meaning thrive. The boy narrows his eyes, writes everything down, and leaves a little smile on the porch like a calling card. Night moves across the roofs and drapes itself over antennas like a soft coat. In the base, the robot friend demands a mission of its own. It suggests, acquire celebratory food. The invader says, reconnaissance only. The robot nods solemnly and returns with paper bags full of triangular happiness and crayons. Part of leadership, he learns, is folding limits gently around the people who love you so they feel like hugs. On certain nights, the city tests his edges. A teacher sends home a notice. Tomorrow is Meet the Grown-Ups. He studies the words, their expectation of mothers and fathers, their belief in handshakes, softened by years of dinner conversations. He goes to the workshop bench and begins to build voices and faces that can nod at the proper moments. Frames blink. Holograms rehearse polite laughter. Somewhere in the circuits, a parental script learns to say, "We're very proud of our child," in a tone that doesn't crack. He watches it twice and adds a pause so it will sound like love. The boy with the notebook, sensing opportunity, plans a presentation titled Proof. He sets the projector, sharpens the arrows in his diagrams, practices the speech. that will feel like breathing out after years of holding. His sister plays her endless game on the couch and says, "If you embarrass yourself, I still want the last slice." He says, "Deal," because some bargains are really bridges. Morning comes with a polite throat clear. The classroom fills with feet. The display at the front glows, photos on corkboard, art projects dangling like bright fruit, a table of cookies the shape of school spirit. Grown-ups arrive in pairs, tired and proud, wearing their days like jackets. Our small invader steps forward between his two practiced projections, smiling portraits that know the right comments about science fair and book reports. For a breath, the room believes in them the way rooms want to believe in good news. Then the boy with the notebook steps into the light. He explains the mint hum, the unusual gait, the way certain words stick like magnets as to the new kid's sentences. He points to a diagram that looks exactly like the truth wearing a lab coat. The projector blinks at the wrong second. The bulb coughs. The extension cord sighs its last. The diagram slides to the floor like a paper ship choosing a slower river. The room's belief tilts, rights itself, decides to be kind. The teacher says thank you for your enthusiasm. The sister takes a cookie and pats her brother's shoulder once, which is how she says, "Keep going," without making a speech. Afterward, in the hush of a hallway that smells like erasers and rain, the invader stands with his robot and listens to his own heartbeat. He is not angry. He is busy. He upgrades the disguise by one quiet notch, not to fool, but to continue. He strengthens the base by two careful bolts. He adds to the plan a box labeled "When someone almost catches you," and inside he writes, "Breathe, smile, wave, learn." That night, he becomes suddenly brave in a small way. He stands in a corner grocery where the lights hum in the key of lullaby and buys snacks with money that looks like homework problem solved. The shopkeeper nods at the exact rhythm of acceptance. He walks home carrying a bag filled with local customs and 2 apples, which he has decided are shaped like planets you can own without raising an army. Upstairs, the living room tries its best to be ordinary. Downstairs, the world spins on the wall. The robot friend places a blanket over his shoulders like a promotion. He works until the lines on the plan become straight enough to let his eyes float. He sleeps at the console with the chair turned just so, one hand on the edge of the future, the other resting open as if holding a promise. Above the roof, satellites blink. Below the floor, cables purr. Across the street, a boy stares out his window and writes one more arrow toward a truth the room did not want. He does not tear the page. He turns it carefully and continues, because persistence is a kind of lullaby, too. The city lowers its volume. Neon breathes slower. Somewhere far away, commanders forget his name for the length of a yawn, and that is fine. Here, tonight, the mission curls at the foot of the bed again, and the planet hums, "Yes, yes, sleep. Learn me in the morning." Afternoon leans against the city and makes the antennas look like tall tuning forks. Our small invader climbs a fire escape with a backpack full of maybe and a heart full of yes. The robot friend clambers after him, humming a triumph that keeps changing keys. On the roof, tar softens under the sun, laundry lines practice flagging, and pigeons discuss traffic as if they were officials. He unrolls a mat of circuitry and clicks a portable tower together, the way kids click toys, except this toy can whisper to clouds. He explains to the robot, which has donned a cape made from a grocery bag, that humans obey invisible schedules printed on the air, alarms, as weather. So why not print one more thing? A very gentle order to surrender. He chooses the softest frequency, the one that sounds like a yawn that forgot to stop. The robot nods so hard, a bolt skips 3 inches and asks if surrender comes with snacks. He says yes, because leadership often does. Power lines hum approval. He flips a switch, and the device breathes. The neighborhood dips, just a little, like a boat when someone steps aboard politely. Dogs pause mid-bark and consider the philosophical aspects of napping. A pair of office windows directly opposite stop arguing and reflect a small patch of sky instead. In the classroom 2 blocks away, a substitute teacher feels suddenly merciful and tells everyone to put their heads down for 5 minutes. The message is not conquest. It is calm wearing a uniform. Across the street, the boy with the notebook feels the tilt and looks up from a page crowded with arrows. He runs, not with panic but with purpose, and arrives at the base of the building as the device begins to sing its second stanza. Surrender your hurry, surrender your frown, surrender the part of your shoulders that never sits down. He bounds up the steps 2 at a time, bursting onto the roof with a breath that announces both truth and stares. The robot salutes him with a slice of invisible cake. He declines graciously. "This is wrong," he says, pointing at the sky, which is not technically wrong. "Not wrong," says the invader, adjusting a dial smaller than a freckle, just efficient. The boy explains that pigeons are dozing while flying, and that a bicyclist circled the same mailbox twice and called it fate. The invader squints, as if looking into a microscope at a problem he created on purpose, and sighs. He turns the dial down until the air stops holding its breath and starts to breathe again. The pigeons wake mid-cloud and resume their sentences. The bicyclist finds his direction and forgives the mailbox. The boy with the notebook stares at the invader, who stares at the dial, and in the thin space between stares, something close to respect sits down and ties its shoes. They sit on the ledge with their feet not quite brave enough to dangle. The robot offers actual cake this time. Where it found it is a mystery best filed under benevolent crimes. They eat. Below, sirens go about their business without urgency. Above, a jet writes a straight line that the wind immediately edits into cursive. When the device is packed away, the city feels like a cat that has decided to keep purring even after the petting stopped. The boy says you can't make people give up, not even gently. The invader says maybe not give up, just give in to a nap. The boy almost smiles. Almost. The next day is a field trip to the museum where history keeps its favorite hats. Our invader, disguised as a perfectly average student who occasionally glows mint at the edges, stands beneath a model of the solar system that hangs like a mobile built by a patient god. The planets circle, clicking softly, and he feels a tug where homesickness stores its luggage. The boy with the notebook watches him, not watching Earth, and writes this down. An elderly docent with a voice made of blanket and cinnamon asks if anyone wants pie from the cafe. The class cheers like a small army discovering a secret ally. Pie arrives on paper plates shaped like minor victories. Our invader examines the triangle with suspicion and then learns again that flavor is technology. Crust engineered to comfort. Filling designed to make a day feel finished. The robot materializes at the museum door with a napkin as an ID badge and salutes every dinosaur. The docent, who has seen stranger things than anyone realizes, gives the robot a second slice because kindness often breaks the rules for good reasons. In the space wing, a video plays, grainy footage of first steps and borrowed flags, the sound of breath tinny and brave. The invader stands very still, listening to the way humans talk to the sky as if it were a neighbor they hope will water the plants while they're away. He almost reaches out. He does not. The boy with the notebook notices the almost and pencils a softer arrow than usual. Evening returns to the street with its pockets full of neon. The bass hums a welcome that sounds like a friendly refrigerator. A call from far away clears the big screen. Commanders arranged like jokes told to impress a mirror. They ask for conquest, and he delivers charts full of calm statistics. A radius of naps, a measurable reduction in grumpiness. Citizens so relaxed they waved at buses. The commanders blink, not understanding that peace is a kind of power, and tell him to break something impressive tomorrow. He salutes and ends the call with the careful grace of someone putting a sleeping child into bed. In the living room, the television tries to teach commercials how to be destiny. The robot watches, taking notes on dance moves and sandwich close-ups. The invader reaches for the remote and pauses on a broadcast of the neighborhood weather. Tomorrow, a forgiving rain, then a weekend devoted to breeze. He decides the sky has good leadership qualities. The boy with the notebook, at home in a room decorated with the trophies of stubbornness, builds a better trap. Not a diagram, not a projector, but a conversation. He practices hello without accusation. He practices questions that are doors instead of nets. His sister, thumbs making constellations on a game controller, nods at the right moments to keep him brave. She says, "Pie again?" And he says yes, because hospitality is a technology too. They meet on the stoop between houses where concrete learns secrets all day and keeps them at night. The boy offers pie on a paper plate. The invader accepts, the way ambassadors accept gifts from nations they hope to rule. They eat quietly. The city breathes. The boy asks what the device was supposed to do besides make the world take a nap. The invader says it was a proof, a rehearsal for a surrender that wouldn't hurt. The boy says the planet is already tired. The invader looks at the street where a mail carrier rubs his shoulders, and a cook leans on a back door, and a nurse counts stars like slow pills. He says perhaps the plan needs edits. Downstairs, the base receives a delivery. A coil of rare wire, a lens that claims it can see thoughts without feeling them, a manual for a machine that should not exist. He opens the manual and decides it is wrong in every interesting way. He rewrites it in the margins, transforming it from a weapon into a broadcast beacon that announces free snacks at the corner store for anyone who shares a good memory. That night, the store sells out of nothing and fills up on stories. The boy with the notebook hears a man talk about a summer when the city smelled like garden hose water, and a woman talk about a song she can't remember the words to but can hum perfectly. The invader listens from the shadowed aisle and realizes conquest does not account for humming. Of course, the city tests him again. A storm rolls in wearing brass buttons. Lightning practices its handwriting on the horizon. The rooftop device, stowed and silent, wants to sing. He restrains it with a hand, not unkindly. The robot counts seconds between flash and thunder and declares itself brave. The boy with the notebook appears with a flashlight and an umbrella too small for two and makes room anyway. They stand like three different kinds of antenna and let the rain erase the chalk drawings on the day. When the power flickers, the base runs on the humility of batteries. Screens dim to thoughtful. The big world map on the wall turns slowly like a sleeper rolling over. He marks a new circle on it, centered on the corner store that traded snacks for memories. The circle isn't a target. It's a lantern. He turns on a little microphone and tries a broadcast no manual ever suggested. It is only a sentence, low and mint and gentle. Remember something kind and keep it. Across the block, someone laughs alone in the kitchen and doesn't feel alone. A taxi driver eases the radio down and lets the rain be music. A nurse in scrubs sits on a stair and thinks of her father, teaching her to tie knots that don't slip. The city, which was not waiting for permission to be human, appreciates the reminder. Later, when the storm has folded itself and slid beneath the horizon, the commanders call again, impatient for a broken landmark. He gives them numbers. 36 reports of improved sleep, 92 doors held open, one lost dog found because the device briefly tuned neighbors to each other's voices. They blink. They do not write that down. They tell him to topple something tall before sunrise. He salutes, ends the call, and topples his own certainty instead, quietly, onto a soft surface. Near midnight, the boy with the notebook leaves a page on the stoop. It says, "If you're not here to hurt us, help us." The invader reads it and feels a door inside his chest tilt on new hinges. The robot brings a blanket and puts it around both of them, without asking who is the enemy tonight. They watch the last of the storm pull its dark sheet over the bridge. The device sleeps. The plan dreams of edits. He falls asleep in the chair, one hand still on the map, the other palm up, as if catching rain that has already passed. Above, satellites blink. Below, cables purr. In the corner store, the owner wipes a counter that is really an altar. In a nearby apartment, a sister finally beats a level and grins at no one in particular. The city lowers its volume. The mint glow fades to moonlight. And the planet, unconquered and unconquerable, hums a lullaby that sounds suspiciously like home. Morning irons. A bright crease down the street, and the polite door decides to be ordinary one more day. Down below, the plan has grown taller in the night. On the bench, a nest of wire, a lens with plans of its own, a coil that remembers thunder, a blueprint drawn in mint ink, and stubborn hope. Today, the small invader will build a tower that can speak to the sky without shouting. The robot friend salutes while wearing a hard hat made of a bowl and great seriousness. They harvest parts from places that keep half dreams, a junkyard where radios still hum the last song they loved, a rooftop where a billboard sleeps face down, a water tower that wants a second job. Neighbors watch from windows with coffee steam halos. The corner store keeper lends a thermos and says, "Don't forget to drink the warm." He nods in the local dialect. Chin, eyebrows, a thank you that fits in a glance. By noon, the tower stands like a praying fork. Ribs of light metal, threads of wire, a crown of little eyes. It is a broadcast machine, yes, but also a question mark, lifted into air. The boy with the notebook arrives, carrying pages that could cut paper. He says, "If you call the wolves, they will believe they were invited." The invader checks a panel, hears his own pulse inside the wires, and replies, "I will call something gentler and see what answers." Far away, the commanders appear on a screen lined in velvet arrogance. Their thrones look bored. Their crowns look heavy. Their sentences arrive pre-polished. They ask for a spectacle, falling monuments, new maps, an anthem that rhymes with surrender. He salutes with old training and new breath, closes the call, and turns all the dials to the side marked careful. The robot friend flips a switch labeled party by mistake, and suddenly a song tries to happen. Streamers consider existing. A bubble escapes protocol. The invader sets the switch to listen, and the tower calms, taking a long, slow breath. When he powers it, the first sound is not conquest, but the city itself. Elevator heartbeats, crosswalk chirps, baby monitors counting sheep, kettles declaring tea. He hears the building's bones creak in satisfaction. The bridge clearing its throat, the laundromat humming a hymn to warm cotton. He adds a filter that turns noise into names. He adds another that lets fear through only if it has instructions attached. The first message goes out in mint hush. "We are here." The second folds right after it. "What do you need?" The third, softer still. "We can wait." Wind carries the questions to cornices and bus routes. In a fifth-floor walk-up, a violinist chooses the slow piece. In an alley, a cook lets a pot rest 2 more minutes. On the long avenue, impatience loses one shoe and decides to walk barefoot. The boy with the notebook frowns at the sky with respect. He says, "You're making a translator." The invader nods. The tower begins returning what it hears, trimmed of panic, threaded with courtesy. Cross at the next light, call your grandmother, share the bench, fix the hinge, breathe. The robot friend hands out stickers that say yes in 600 fonts. Evening brings a complication wrapped in metal. The sky opens like a zipper, and a small scout drops through, sleek, sure, loyal to orders written by someone who never met this street. It hovers above the water tower and blinks command. The mint message the invader meant for patience has brushed the fleet, and they sent a question mark of their own, sharpened. The boy with the notebook grabs a flashlight and begins semaphores in a language made up on the spot. The sister appears, game controller in hand, thumb ready to teach electricity manners. The robot friend salutes the scout, offers pie, and receives a warning beep that means no thank you in enemy dialect. The invader stands between tower and drone, small and exactly in the right place. He turns the big dial 2 notches toward kind, 1 notch toward brave. He lets the tower sing a lullaby learned from elevators and kettles and crosswalks, the city's long exhale. The scout's lights blink the way eyes do when rain remembers your lashes. It wobbles. The boy's flashlight becomes a steady heartbeat. The sister's thumbs whisper a code that means be gentle into the local grid. The robot friend sings a song about snacks so soft it sounds like a blanket. Metal lands like a tired bird in the park, folding its wings without complaint. They circle it, not as victors, but as mechanics of mercy. The invader opens a panel that once only accepted orders and installs memory instead. 4 minutes of children laughing near a fountain, the smell of hot bread, the feeling of a door held open by a stranger with perfect timing. The scout, which is only a traveler with strict parents, decides to sleep. In the morning it will remember the bread without knowing why. They do not waste the gift. They borrow the quiet engine and turn it into a generator for the corner store when storms come. They turn a sensor into a nightlight for the alley where older knees climb too many stairs. They string the smallest lenses into a wind chime that translates breeze into promises. Back soon, got you. Warm soup. The tower keeps listening. The city keeps answering. The commanders call, their silhouettes sharp against a backdrop of important curtains. Report, they demand, and he does. One tall thing toppled, walls between neighbors, many landmarks moved. People from alone to together, casualties, none, except for a little pride that didn't need all that height. They look at him as if he has mispronounced a word on purpose. Break something, they say. Perhaps your habit of kindness. He salutes, and the screen slips into the dark. Night holds the block as gently as a teacup. On the stoop, the boy with the notebook sets down a page that has changed handwriting in the middle. It reads, "If this is how you invade, I can live with it." The invader folds the page and stores it where plans go when they decide to be people. He sends one more message, short as a nod up to the fleet. Unsuitable for conquest due to contagious softness. Recommend quarantine. It sails past satellites that blink like skeptical elders and disappears into the part of space where bureaucracy naps. A small festival happens without permits. Soup appears. Someone brings a radio that only plays one station, and it is kindness. The sister wins a level and shows the robot friend how to high-five without throwing their arm. The corner store keeper tapes a sign in the window. Memory trade extended. Bring 2, take 1. No change needed. The tower turns half asleep and prints a final bulletin on the air. Hold doors, hold breath, hold each other lightly, then let go. The city obeys in its own messy way. Upstairs, a couple stops, arguing mid-sentence, and starts washing a pan together. Downstairs, a dog takes its human to bed on schedule. Across the avenue, an elevator pauses between floors and decides not to break tonight. He climbs the water tower ladder and sits with his feet on the rim, a small mint star among bigger ones. He thinks of the scout sleeping in the park and the fleet that will puzzle over the quarantine stamp. He thinks of the boy and the sister and the corner store and the wind chime that turns breeze into promises. He thinks of home, a word that has started learning two definitions at once. The robot friend arrives with a blanket and a thermos and the kind of grin that keeps batteries charged. They share warmth. The tower dims until there's only listening, which is the purest kind of broadcast. The plan, which once wore sharp corners, smooths itself like a sheet before sleep. The street grows quiet enough to hear slippers on old wood, cards shuffling 3 windows over, a late bus apologizing to no one. He dozes sitting up, hand resting on the railing, the other open to catch any falling idea that might need a safe landing. Above him, satellites blink. Below him, cables purr. In a nearby room, a pencil rolls off a desk and decides the floor is a friend. The city lowers its volume. The mint glow fades to moon. And somewhere far away, a fleet that does not understand lullabies drifts an inch off course and wonders why it feels a little less sure of conquest and a little more interested in pie. Dawn rinses the block in pale mint, and the tower on the water tank wakes by listening first, the way good radios do. Down below, the polite door lifts its eyelids. Our small invader ties his gloves, tucks a pencil behind one ear as if planning were a hairstyle, and studies the overnight printout, a thin ribbon of code that arrived from far away, crisp as a cold voice. Audit, it reads, a word shaped like a finger tapping a desk. Before noon, the sky unzips along a seam no one else can see, and something like a metronome lowers through the light. It is not a warship. It is worse for people who enjoy hurrying. It keeps time. It counts rules. It lands in the park with a hush that tries to be polite and almost is. On its side, an emblem that means prove it. The boy with the notebook is already there, winded from truth the way others are winded from stares. His sister arrives with a game still glowing in her hand and a look that says, remember to drink water and behave. The robot friend sprints in a zigzag, wearing a tie drawn on with marker, holding a clipboard and 2 pies, because meetings should have snacks. The corner store keeper locks up and carries a thermos labeled warm, like a small miracle. The auditor opens with a sentence that could slice paper, present conquest. The invader bows the way a good neighbor nods from a stoop. He says, I will present outcomes. The auditor's lenses whir unimpressed. Numbers it demands. He points to the listening tower, to the alley nightlight made from a borrowed sensor, to a wind chime that translates breeze into promises. He points to the stoop where a page changed handwriting in the middle. He does not say love out loud because some words work better by being shown. The auditor unfolds instruments, prisms that sort honesty, scales that weigh intentions, a ruler marked in kinds of noise. It sets them down on the grass, tidy as an apology. The tower tunes itself to a softer key. Crosswalks far away chirp plainer. Kettles with boiling opinions soften their rhetoric. The block breathes in, then out, timing itself to a rhythm that belongs to nobody and everyone. He begins with a broadcast that is barely a sound. Remember something kind and keep it. The auditor points a cone at the air to catch crimes, it hears. A shoe sliding back to hold a door, a bus driver pausing for a sprinting late morning, a violinist choosing the sad piece because sadness needs somewhere to sit. The needle trembles as if the machine just heard its own favorite song and didn't know it had one. Unsatisfied, the auditor requests demonstration. The invader nods to the boy and the sister. They nod to neighbors leaning out of windows, to dogs walking people, to the corner store keeper with thermos and a stack of cups. A line forms without orders. The line is for nothing in particular except being together. The robot friend distributes name tags that say hello in 600 fonts. People write their names as if they were carrying them into a new room. The auditor aims its prisms at faces. It expects fear and finds fatigue seasoned with stubbornness. It expects grudges and finds jokes. It measures and measures until measurement feels like sweeping the ocean with a spoon. The invader steps closer, small and exactly the right size. He says quietly, "There is a kind of surrender that helps and a kind that harms. We're practicing the first kind." The auditor recalibrates in a flurry of very official blinking. Afternoon leans its warm elbow on the park fence. A breeze picks up and the wind chime whispers back. "Soon got you, warm soup." The tower listens and returns what it hears, trimmed of panic, threaded with courtesy. "Breathe at the next light. Your neighbor's name is Alma. Today's rain smells like coins and basil. You have time." The auditor's ruler, which only recognizes volume, grows confused by gentleness that is not quiet, but wide. The invader offers numbers because sometimes you have to be bilingual. He speaks totals the block understands, doors held, naps improved, hinges fixed, storms that arrived and left with everyone accounted for, pies divided by strangers, like equations balancing themselves. The auditor logs every slice of pie with the seriousness of a courtroom. It does not eat. The robot friend, in a gesture of enlightened diplomacy, places a plate on the craft's cool hull anyway. Crust warms metal, filling perfumes protocol. Coming to the last page of its checklist, the auditor attempts the hardest test it owns. It opens a lens and projects a door in the air, tall and bright, and shaped like home but elsewhere. The door hums a distant sweet chord that tastes like old victories. "Step through," it requests. "If you love this place, you can leave it, and it will remain changed." The group goes as silent as a library deciding to trust a child with a big book. The invader looks at the door and sees a throne room that never learned to laugh, a corridor polished by the souls of worry, a planet where conquest has replaced tenderness, the way weeds replace intention when no one waters. He looks at the park where name tags cluster like migrating birds, at the boy with the notebook whose arrows have started curving into hearts by accident, at the sister who pretends not to notice she's guarding everyone's feelings, at the corner store keeper pouring warm into little cups. He says not yet, but he says it with a smile that means I am staying on purpose. The door hums again, considering, like a cat being told it may not climb the curtain, and discovering it does not need to. The auditor lowers the lens. It was a trap and a question. The answer fits neither box. Its prisms show a faint halo around every person on the grass, the measurable aura of being seen and being safe for 5 minutes in a row. The rulers clatter like silverware at the end of a good meal. The scales tip towards something no one taught them. Enough. Even bureaucracy can nap. The auditor's lights dim to thoughtful. Its metronome mind slips half a beat. The robot friend hums a lullaby learned from elevators and kettles. The invader steps near and installs a memory in a panel that had only ever accepted orders. A loop of neighbors laughing at a dog that refuses to fetch anything but the wind. 3 seconds of bell on a bicycle. It sounds like childhood. The warmth of a thermos handed across a fence. The machine takes the memory without protest and does not know why it feels heavier and better. The report still must be written. The invader speaks into the auditor's waiting cone in a voice that would not wake a sleeping plant. Findings, he says. Subject world resists conquest by becoming specific. Contagious softness present. Recommend distance, observation, patience. The auditor stamps the sentence with a seal shaped like a pause. Its mission was to demand a map. It received a recipe. That will do. Evening drifts in with pockets full of neon and brass. The block decides to throw a very quiet party. Somebody places a tablecloth over a park bench. Somebody else brings a radio that only finds one station, and it is kindness again, still live. The sister beats a level with the flourish of someone giving herself permission to rest. The boy with the notebook tucks the last sharp arrow back into a page and lets it soften to a path. The corner store keeper teaches the robot friend to refill cups without overflowing. A lesson and a parable. The auditor lifts from the grass as gently as a promise kept. It ascends through its private zipper in the evening and vanishes into the part of the sky where rules go to rethink themselves. A ribbon of code unspools back to the fleet and says, in a language that tastes like mint, unsuitable for conquest for reasons currently classified as lovely, recommend prolonged quarantine and the study on the structural integrity of pi. The tower on the water tank lowers its voice to listening only. It prints a single sentence on the air that anyone can read if they stand still. You did enough today. Streetlights nod in agreement and click on, one by one like polite applause. Windows become little constellations of ordinary. Somewhere upstairs, someone forgives themselves for not finishing everything. Somewhere downstairs, someone starts a load of laundry that will finish itself while they sleep. Our small invader climbs the ladder and sits with his feet on the rim of the tank, a mint star folded into the bigger ones. The robot friend arrives with a blanket and gravity-safe snacks. The boy and the sister wave from the grass and head home by the long route on purpose, letting the block tell them stories in familiar corners. The corner store keeper flips the sign to closed and leaves the memory box on the counter, because trust is a kind of locksmith. He looks at the city. It looks back without baring its teeth. He thinks about missions that change their uniforms, about reports that decide to become lullabies. He thinks about the door that hummed and chose not to insist. He thinks about a fleet learning patience by accident. He thinks about tomorrow, which will need the same small bravery as today. Hold doors, hold breath, hold each other lightly, then let go. He dozes there, hand on the railing, the other palm up as if catching whatever falls, ideas, stars, crumbs of kindness. Above him, satellites blink. Below him, cables purr. On the middle floor of a building across the way, someone turns a page and smiles without remembering why. The city lowers its volume. The mint glow settles to moon, and the planet, unconquered and very awake to itself, hums good night in a key that sounds suspiciously like home. And the evening lays a soft hand on the city, and the tower answers with a nod you can hear. Streetlights lift their small moons. Windows bloom like stars that learn to live indoors. Our small invader stands at the workbench and writes a message for a fleet that only believes the loud parts of stories. He chooses a pen instead of a trumpet. He begins, status, unchanged planet, altered mission, improved naps. The robot friend drifts by with a tray of gravity-safe snacks and a badge that says assistant to the invader of kindness. It straightens a pile of printouts no one asked to be straightened and hums the elevator hymn. The boy with the notebook arrives carrying a page where every arrow has softened into a road. His sister follows, a victorious glow still clinging to her thumbs. A quiet watchfulness, keeping time in the background like a metronome that knows when to pause. They climb the water tower ladder to where the air is clean of hurry. The antenna wears dusk like jewelry. The city spreads beneath them, stitched together by bus routes and gossip, by the small holiness of shared weather. The invader sets the transmitter to a frequency that won't jab anyone awake. He reads the report aloud so more than the fleet can hear. Subject displays high resistance to control via specificity, he says. Attempts at coercion replaced by practice in neighbor math. Door hand passage. Pot ladle many bowls. Tower listening language of small mercies. Collateral effects include measurable softening of wrists, reduction sidewalk tempers, improved pie distribution protocols. Probability of conquest decreases in proportion to the number of names learned. He pauses. A train turns a corner somewhere far off and sighs like a tired giant who found the right pillow. He continues. Recommend reclassification, not target but teacher. Implement quarantine of kindness to avoid contamination of imperial objectives. Side note, contamination appears beneficial to sleep. The message rides the air in a mint ribbon, slips between satellites, taps lightly on old rules, vanishes into the distance where bureaucracies keep their bedtime. Down on the block, the corner store keeper turns the sign to closed and leaves the memory box out anyway. A trust lantern. With the report sent, silence sits with them like a friend who doesn't need to be introduced. The boy asks, "Now what?" The invader considers the horizon where the bridge becomes rumor and says, "Now we keep doing the small things until they add up to a sky you can stand under without armor." The sister snorts softly at that and says armor is heavy, snacks are lighter. She hands him one. He agrees with his mouth full. A wind climbs the ladder, finds the chime they made from borrowed lenses, and translates breeze into promises. Back soon, got you, warm soup. Below, a dog escorts its human into a puddle and both forgive each other. A nurse off the night shift counts 3 stars and decides that's enough to go home happy. A window opens and a violin chooses the slow piece because the day deserves a coda. Far away, the fleet hears the report and tilts minutely. Somewhere in a room lined with confident curtains, a commander clears a throat shaped like a ceremony and issues an order no one expected. Stand off, observe, refrain. The word refrain has 2 meanings. The fleet, accidentally poetic, chooses both. On the roof, the robot friend unfurls a little string of lights like a polite comet. It places a blanket around shoulders without asking which ones need it. All of them do. The invader watches the city practice being a village and thinks of the door the auditor conjured. How it hummed like a remembered corridor and then decided not to insist. The boy leans back until the stars fit in the bowl of his eyes. The sister checks the tower's battery and the sky's battery and find them both satisfactory. They descend to the park where the grass keeps secrets and gives away none. A tablecloth appears by consensus. Soup arrives by rumor. Someone sets a radio to the station that only plays kindness. It is a low party, the sort that wears slippers. Name tags flower again. Hello printed in 600 fonts. People write not only names, but also today I fixed a hinge. Today I forgave myself for being tired. Today I held a door and didn't narrate it in my head. The invader stands in the line like anyone else and adds, "Today I changed my mission, and it kept me." The knight leans closer, listening. He returns to the base for one last adjustment. On the bench waits the first device he ever built here. The one that could have turned a neighborhood into a nap without asking. He opens its panel and replaces its heart with the smallest memory. The corner store's bell chiming for a kid who returned a borrowed pen. The violin is finishing the slow piece and smiling at the empty room. A bicycle bell that sounds like childhood choosing to stay a while. He closes the panel. The device, which once wanted to command, now only wants to hum. He lets it. The boy with the notebook discovers he no longer needs the notebook to be believed, but keeps it anyway because habits can be friends. He draws a map of the block that labels the important landmarks: stoop, soup, chime, hin, jew. His sister, having conquered the level in the day, declares an ordinance: lights out by kindness, alarm set for mercy. The robot friend posts it on the fridge in careful marker and illustrates it with pies. Midnight arrives wearing the color of permission. A thin rain starts, the sort that erases chalk without scolding and polishes leaves just enough to make them proud. The tower lowers to listening only. It prints a final bulletin on the air for anyone awake enough to read it. You did enough today. Let the city carry you the rest of the way to sleep. The invader climbs the water tower ladder one more time. He sits on the rim and lets the mint glow inside him, fade to a friendly pilot light. Above, the fleet drifts a cautious circle around the planet and, for the first time in its long life, does not name the feeling it has. Below, cables purr. Across the street, a lamp clicks off like a sentence that found its period. He thinks of the first landing, of the small, brave posture he wore like a shield, of the mission typed in a font that never smiled. He thinks of pie, of surveys, of the boy's sharp arrows curving into roads, of the sister's thumbs translating electricity into gentleness, of a store that trades snacks for memories and always makes change in stories. He thinks of home and realizes the word can be plural without breaking. Sleep comes up the ladder with invisible feet. The robot friend arrives with a blanket that remembers yesterday's warmth. It tucks him in the way you tuck a plan after it decides to become a promise. The boy and the sister wave from the park, then slip into doorways that know their names. The city lowers its volume until you can hear slippers, pages turning, a late bus apologizing, the moon rehearsing its exit. He closes his eyes. The tower listens. The wind chime says back soon, got you, warm soup, and means all three. The report to the fleet hums quietly through space, a lullaby disguised as paperwork. And the planet, unconquered and awake to itself, sings him to sleep in a key that sounds suspiciously like home. So now we will hear the story of the Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack. Night leans over the harbor and teaches the masts to sway in time with the moon. Ropes sigh. Wooden ribs creak the way old chairs do when stories sit down. The water keeps a gentle beat against the pylons, a slow drum you can nap to. Lamps along the pier wear little halos and practice being stars. Somewhere a bell rings the soft hour nobody argues with. In a snug driftwood house perched above the tide, a child with sea salt curls and pockets full of candy wrappers presses his ear to the wall to hear the ocean's heartbeat. It's close enough to kiss the floorboards. He knows every tone. The glad glug when the tide turns, the whispering foam when it tucks itself under the dock. The hush that means a whale the size of a living room is passing by to check on him like a grandmother in the hallway. He waves without looking. The water waves back with a sleepy shiver. Across the room, a coat 2 sizes too brave hangs from a peg. It smells like storms that changed their minds and came back as breezes, like cinnamon sticks traded for maps, like pockets where crumbs and coins share secrets. A hat with a bent brim lounges on a crate as if it sailed around the world but really napped through most of it. Beside it, a jar of rock candy shining like bottled lighthouses. There's always one more piece when kindness asks. Down on the dock, A figure with a splinter-bright beard and a grin full of tall tails gestures at the horizon, as if pointing could bring it closer. He speaks in a voice that tastes like salt and caramel at the same time. Tonight he tells the moon about a place where sugar grows on trees and rivers run like melted taffy, where every wave leaves a ribbon of sweetness on the sand and you can hear spoons clinking in the tide. The moon nods, indulgent. It has heard this one before and loves it anyway. The child tiptoes out to the rail and looks along the planks that know his footsteps by heart. Barrels smell like molasses and adventure. Nets dry themselves with the patience of old fishermen. A gull, soft-bellied and polite, perches on a piling and pretends not to listen. The child leans over the water and the water leans back, and for a moment the world feels like a hammock hung between two very kind palms. He isn't supposed to be awake. Bedtime already kissed his forehead. But the harbor makes promises at night that daylight forgets to keep. He makes a small boat out of his hands and lets it sail the air. The bearded storyteller spots him and chuckles low, not to scare the fish. Up there, he calls, is a navigator who can steer with his heart. Up there, a captain whose compass is a candy jar that never runs out when shared. The child blushes a color you can taste. From below the pier comes the whoom of warm lungs and the roll of an eye as big as a plate. The whale rises just enough to make a calm hill in the dark, a moving porch swing. The child whispers hello, and the whale answers with a bubble that smells like peppermint tea. He leans his cheek against the railing. The wood is cool and kind. He tells the whale he's ready to find the place the stories point to, ready to tie a candy-striped ribbon to the mast, ready to count stars like sugar cubes in a mug. The storyteller steps closer, boots making that soft dock music, and lays a map on the rail. It's mostly blank. The best ones are. On the edge, where cartographers usually draw monsters, someone has sketched a stack of pancakes with butter laughing down the sides. There's an X where the harbor is, and a dotted line wandering like a daydream toward a corner labeled, maybe here. The child traces the path with a finger sticky from a secret caramel. The caramel agrees to come along. They talk in bedtime voices about the rules of voyage. Rule 1, always share the sweets. They weigh less that way. Rule 2, when the waves look grumpy, sing them something silly until they remember their manners. Rule 3, if you see a storm, ask if it needs a snack. Even weather gets cranky. The child repeats the rules back, earnest as a prayer. He adds one more. If a friend says they're tired, drop anchor and nap on purpose. The storyteller salutes. The whale approves with a smaller, prouder whoom. The harbor breathes deeper. Somewhere a bakery shuts its eyes and still manages to send a cinnamon breeze across the water. A lantern paints a golden path from the gangplank to the child's bare toes and back again. He steps onto it as if it were a promise. The boards feel like warm toast. He practices captain thing, knots tied like hugs, counting clouds by flavor, pointing his chin at the horizon without squinting. The hat with the bent brim tips itself his way. It will fit when his dreams do. He asks the old storyteller if the sweet island is real. The beard scratches thoughtfully. The answer arrives in pieces like a puzzle wrapped in taffy. Real, he says, is a flavor you make by stirring stories into courage, a pinch of luck, and a handful of friends. Some nights it tastes like marshmallow, some like butterscotch, and some like salt tears that mean you made it farther than you thought. The child nods, filing the recipe under heart. The whale nudges the piling so gently the whole dock rocks like a cradle. The stars above answer with their own slow sway, boats hanging from invisible ropes. The child's eyes heavy themselves a little, then a little more. He rests his chin on folded arms and watches the thin silver road the moon leaves on the water, an invitation written in light. Tomorrow, the storyteller promises, they'll push off at the kindness hour, when the gulls yawn and the tide agrees. Tomorrow they'll stock a galley with peppermint, lemon drops, and sturdy bread that forgives butter. Tomorrow they'll set a course that listens. Tonight, the harbor is homework for dreams. He reads it aloud to himself without words, the names of every creek and ripple, and the slosh that means yes, the hush that means wait, the tiny chimes of spoons inside mugs up and down the wharf. He imagines a deck under his feet that knows his name, a sail that puffs like cheeks when it laughs, a bell that rings only for celebrations and soup. The storyteller drapes his too brave coat over the child's shoulders. It falls like a curtain between him and the breeze. The hat with the bent brim tries to climb his hair and fails politely. The jar of rock candy clicks once, the sound of a promise being saved for later. The whale sinks just enough to tuck the water's blanket tighter, then rises again, so nothing feels like goodbye. The child stands up as straight as a mast and salutes the night, the pier, the gull, the baker, the street cats who patrol like velvet pirates, the moon with its silver cargo. He thanks them for keeping watch. He thanks the sea for rocking the buildings to sleep. He thanks the stories for leaving breadcrumbs of sugar across the dark. Back inside the driftwood house, he pulls a quilt over his nose and leaves his eyes out to finish the view. The harbor keeps counting his breaths like coins in a clean jar. Down the pilings, barnacles whisper about travelers and promise to clap quietly at launch. The storyteller settles onto a crate, both hands around a mug that remembers storms and woos peace. The whale circles once, making a punctuation mark in the black, then rests beneath the bedroom like a promise you can nap on. The last thing the child hears is a soft shanty that doesn't need a chorus. Hum, go the ropes. Hum, go the beams. Hum, go the sweet old lungs below. He dreams of a map that fills itself in with each kindness, of a compass that points toward laughter, of a shore where the sand squeaks like sugar underfoot. Morning will come wearing a striped scarf and the word begin stitched along the edge. For now, the harbor rocks him, the way a good story does, toward a sleep so gentle it tastes like candy you didn't have to earn. Morning ties a striped scarf around the harbor, and whispers begin along the docks. Nets yawn. Gulls rub sleep from their wings. The water taps the pilings twice, ready, ready. And the driftwood house blinks like a lighthouse practicing its smile. Inside, the child wakes with pockets already crinkling, hair salted by dreams. He presses his ear to the wall. The ocean's heartbeat has moved a little closer, as if it crept upstairs in the night to make sure he was covered. Down on the planks, the bearded storyteller shakes crumbs from his coat and lays out the voyage in objects instead of speeches, a coil of rope that keeps secrets nicely, a tin compass that prefers laughter to north, a handbell that only rings for celebration and soup, 3 jars, peppermint, lemon drops, and courage disguised as hard candy. The hat with the bent brim hops from peg to crate, and then to the child's head, where it fits not perfectly but promisingly. The whale rises with a womb as warm as toast, and offers a bubble that smells like tea. It pops against the child's nose and leaves a map of steam that fades into yes. They make a list together without writing. Bread that forgives butter, extra socks for weather with moods, a blanket that remembers last night's warmth, a bucket labeled for stars in case they catch too many, a broom for sweeping worries off the deck, a jar for names of new friends. The harbor cat, promoted by consensus to quartermaster, inspects each item with whiskers solemnity and signs off by sitting in the middle of everything. The boat is small enough to be tender and large enough to carry bedtime. Its planks remember lullabies and whale song. Its mast has one knuckle where storms used to knock and now only tap politely. When the child steps aboard, the deck introduces itself under his feet the way a floor says, "Welcome in a good house." He answers by tying the first knot of the day. Loop, hug, promise. The knot approves, settling like a nap. Rule 1 is tested immediately. Share the sweets. Dock hands appear from doorways where breakfast is still a whisper. He offers lemon drops to hands that have pulled more mornings than most people see. The hands take one, tuck another for later, and leave blessing crumbs behind in their voices. Rule 2 meets the tide. The waves look grumpy, so the child hums a tune about pancakes until the swells remember their manners and pillow out into the kind of motion that rocks stories to life. Rule 3 squints at the horizon, a low bank of cloud thinking about drama. They set a small plate of peppermint on the rail, and whether the weather eats it or only smells it, the cloud decides to save its opinion for after lunch. Departure happens in a hush that feels like a choir breathing in. The bearded storyteller unties the last line with a flourish that would be vain if it weren't so happy. The whale shoulders the boat outward with the gentleness of a grandmother guiding a toddler toward the cake. The child takes the tiller, the wood is smooth where confidence has worn it, and points the bow toward the place where light lays a silver ribbon on the water. The harbor waves from every window and hinge. Barnacles applaud very softly so as not to chip themselves. Out beyond the breakwater, everything becomes bigger and kinder at the same time. The water turns the color of a deep thought. The wind remembers which pocket it kept the pleasant temperature in. Sails climb the mast like laundry that learned to dance. The child leans into the tiller, and it leans back like a friend who understands secret languages. The hat's bent brim shades his eyes exactly enough to make bravery taste like caramel. A flock of gulls volunteers as guides. They do not speak because speaking would be ordinary. Instead, they arrange themselves into punctuation marks across the sky so the boat can read the day. A comma for patience near the shoals, an exclamation by a patch of quick water, a gentle parenthesis around a patch of floating kelp where bright jelly creatures drift like hard candies dropped by a generous cloud. The child waves to them all and promises not to nibble the sea, even though it sparkles like sugar when the sun looks at it sideways. Fog arrives not as trouble, but as invitation. Milk poured slow into tea. The world narrows to boat, bell, breath. The storyteller shows how sound can be a rope. One soft ring of the celebration and soup bell every dozen heartbeats, each note traveling outward to let anything listening know that kindness is passing. The whale swims just off the starboard shoulder, a moving wall of comfort, humming directions into the water where directions belong. The child watches the compass prefer laughter to north and laughs twice. The needle points. They follow. Out of the white drifts, a little raft of traders, faces rosy with the effort of cheer. Their wares are odd as dreams. Spoons that make soup taste like home, jars that keep lullabies from going stale, candles that smell like freshly folded towels. They barter without numbers. The child trades 3 lemon drops and a promise to write for a tin of windproof matches and a nap-sized pillow embroidered with the word sooner or later, whichever helps. The traders toast the exchange with the cups of cinnamon water, then vanish into fog with a chorus of "See you at the next kindness." When the sun slips its hand back into the day, the boat finds itself among islands that look like kneeling beasts, low humps of rock with tufts of green like eyebrows. On one, a goat committee debates the ethics of eating seaweed. On another, a lighthouse blinks as if it just remembered the punchline. They stop long enough to collect a pocketful of flat, skipping stones and to read the notice someone has carved into a drift log. If you take a shell, tell the beach a story so it won't miss it. The child obliges, recounting the tale of a bread loaf that forgave too much butter and didn't regret it. Back afloat, the afternoon spreads like honey. The boat purls along the edge of an underwater meadow where fish hang like ornaments on invisible threads. The child drops the bucket labeled for stars over the side, just to practice, and hauls up a sprinkle of sea glitter that refuses to be captured and escapes back into the sun, which is exactly what stars should do. He laughs like a gull, quick and delighted, and the laugh ricochets between wavelets until even the wind chuckles once, which it almost never does. They chart progress in kindness instead of miles, one gull rescued from a knot of kelp, 2 waves renamed from worry to rock, 3 verses of a shanty remixed so the rhymes pair soup with scoop and brave with save. The bearded storyteller marks each success on the blank map with a small candy-sticky fingerprint. The child's hands make constellations that will later remind them how far you can travel without leaving the gentle. Toward evening, the sky lays down a path of copper coins across the west. The boat follows, rich without counting. A breeze carries rumors from boats they can't quite see. Someone hauling lines and singing off-key with joy. Someone telling a mop it's done enough for today. Someone whispering to a photograph before tucking it into a dry tin. The child understands every rumor perfectly because the sea translates for free. They heave to in the lee of a drowsy island shaped like a sleeping seal. The anchor finds a good idea to hold. The boat settles with a satisfied creak. The whale makes a slow circle and parks beneath like a second anchor made of lullaby. Supper is bread that forgives butter again, plus a spoonful of jam the color of sunset scraped from the very bottom of a jar that refuses to give up. They eat on the deck with their legs dangling into the golden air. The hat with the bent brim slides forward once and must be pushed back with dignity. When the first star pricks the blue, they count the day's lessons aloud so the night can memorize them. Lesson 1. Sharing makes sweets lighter and boats steadier. Lesson 2. Weather has feelings and snacks. Lesson 3. Fog listens. Answer kindly. Lesson 4. The map fills in faster when you measure with names. Lesson 5. Naps taken on purpose count double toward bravery. The handbell does not ring, but it wants to. The child writes friends in the jar of names and drops in a pebble for each kind face met since breakfast. The sound it makes is the exact noise of being kept. The harbor feels both far and near, like a word you can say from anywhere. The wide place ahead smells faintly of sugar and more strongly of possibility. Night climbs aboard with bare feet and no hurry. The boat breathes with the whale. The water turns its pages slower. The storyteller wraps the blanket that remembers warmth around the child's shoulders and points at a constellation that looks like a jar tipped over, spilling stars right along the route they've chosen. The child tucks the nap-sized pillow under his ear and decides sooner is later when you're content. He falls asleep to a scale played by small waves on the hull. Doze, dream, drift, deep. The hat with the bent brim tilts into guard position. The broom stands at parade rest over the corner where worries would sit if they'd been allowed aboard. The compass needle, having laughed to its satisfaction, points at the soft snore of a whale and calls that true. Out beyond the sleeping seal of an island, The horizon thinks about the sweet place the stories promised and decides not to hide it forever. In the morning, perhaps a ribbon will appear, light like sugar dust, leading onward. For now, the sea rocks the boat the way a good friend rocks a cradle, steady, tender, tireless. The map lies open on the crate, sticky with thumbprints that shine like small moons. The child breathes the tide in and out, and the boat keeps time. Morning opens like a candy wrapper, and the sea answers with a stretch. The boat lifts its chin to a breeze that smells faintly of oranges and more strongly of yes. The bearded storyteller traces a fingertip over the blank map, sticky constellations of thumbprints shining where miles used to be. The whale surfaces with a womb that sounds like good advice and points its wide back toward a faint ribbon in the distance. A pale track laid on the water, as if the sun had dropped a scarf. They find it by listening. The taffy current, slow and sweet, tugging the boat along as gently as a friend leading you across a crowded room. The child dips a ladle and lifts a rope of glossy water that stretches and doesn't break, then lets it slide back with a sigh. The hat with the bent brim leans into the wind to read it better. The compass, pleased, points not north but toward laughter, which at the moment lies exactly ahead. Gulls draft a new sentence overhead, a dotted underline that says, "Keep going." Seaweed frills wave like hands along the current's edge. Jelly-bright creatures bob past like boiled sweets in their wrappers, each one lighting up when the child whispers hello. Rule 2 remembers itself when waves look grumpy. Sing. He tries out a tune about biscuits and bravery. The waves grin into soft pillows, and the boat rocks the melody back until it drifts into the seams of the day. Fog arrives in polite patches, the kind that asks permission before sitting. Bell, breath, bell. The world narrows to the sound of the boat's own kindness. When the white pulls back again, they see it rising ahead like a daydream that found a hammer. A town made of barrels, staves banded in iron, decks nailed to patience, rope walkways looping from cluster to cluster like licorice. Flags stitched from old sails flutter with the practiced swagger of markets that have seen weather and chosen not to be impressed. They nose in at a sign that says, "Welcome" out loud without using letters. A dockhand with hands like braided rope tosses a line and salutes the whale, who salutes back with a bubble the size of a pumpkin. The child steps onto the barrel street and feels it breathe beneath his soles, buoyant, agreeable. Stalls tilt toward him as if eager to show what they know. Jars of candied ginger stacked like little lighthouses. Coils of line labeled gentle and stubborn. Charts printed on oiled cloth that smell like all the places they waited to become true. A bell rings the hour of bargaining. It is a soft hour. Coins a few. Stories are many. The child trades a fistful of lemon drops and a weather-appropriate compliment for a tin whistle that sounds exactly like a breeze, sneaking cookies from a windowsill. The bearded storyteller swaps soup recipes for a faded chart marked shoals of snoring and keep a biscuit handy. The quartermaster cat performs an inspection of a fishmonger's bucket and stamps approval by sitting in it until the fishmonger's laughter leaks out. In a corner where 3 ropes meet, a barber has set up a chair with a view of everything worth viewing. He trims hair and tall tails, snipping the parts that snag. He offers the child a comb carved from a whale's kind memory and advises the hat with the bent brim how to sit like it belongs to a captain whose pockets are full of maps and candy and never fear. Payment requested. 1 song later. When the wind needs it. Accepted. They refill the jar labeled courage disguised as hard candy from a barrel whose lid reads, "Take what you can share." A pair of sisters selling raincoats, stitched from sailcloth, press a small yellow one into the child's hands for almost nothing, and a promise to keep clear of rudeness if it blows in. Rudeness does blow in some days, same as weather. The whale hums agreement. From the far end of the town, where the barrels bob with a little more bounce, comes a sound like cutlery clinking from inside the sea. The stall keepers lean toward it without noticing they are leaning. That's the Candy Reef thinking, someone says, and the words make everyone smile like a memory. The map calls the place maybe here, and the child's chest calls it soon. Before they go, a bellhop with a wooden tray full of glass bottles offers them sips of storm cordial in middling weather just to keep the edges round. The child declines, but pockets a sugar cube soaked in the stuff, wrapped like a secret. The bearded storyteller nods gravely, as if tucking away a lullaby for thunder. The quartermaster cat steals exactly one sardine out of politeness and leaves a whisker in exchange. They push off on the outgoing side of the town. Barrel roofs bob in farewell, flags wag, and someone plays a tune on a saw that makes even the gulls blink slower. Back on the taffy current, the boat feels lighter, as if it remembered how much it likes to be a boat. The child ties the new yellow coat to a peg where it can learn the ship before it has to earn its keep. The whistle rides on a lanyard against his chest and chooses to be quiet until asked. Clouds gather, not in anger, but in appetite. The weather is hungry for a story. The bearded storyteller sets the handbell beside the helm and begins a tale about a skipper who once convinced lightning to autograph his oar. The sky, flattered, turns its pockets out and finds only a few small rumblings and a handful of rain that forgot to be cold. The child offers the wrapped storm sugar to the breeze, which tastes and decides to be less ambitious. Rule 3 holds: if you see a storm, feed it a snack. Afternoon leans into gold. The current swells, pushing them toward a wide blue hush that makes the whale rise and fall just to keep from sighing too loud. Ahead, the water changes color the way a secret changes a room. The surface freckles with pale, hard glints, the fringe of something sweet hidden mostly below. The bearded storyteller lifts his chin. "Candy Reef," he says, and the words try to sparkle. They shorten sail, drop anchor in the polite sand just outside the shimmer, and let the boat turn gently to face what it came to see. The child leans over the side. Under the skin of the sea, a city of sugar hums to itself, combs of amber and clear, shelves of brittle lace, caverns of spun glass that look like swirls of frost from a long-ago window. Fish drift through corridors like teaspoons in a drawer. Every now and then a flake breaks off and floats up, a snow of sweetness that melts into nothing but a better mood. The whale rolls an eye up and blinks the way giants blink when trying to be delicate. "No nibbling," says the bearded storyteller gently. "We're guests." The child nods. He plays the whistle once, a note as thin as thread, and the reef answers with a chord that tastes like lemon on the tongue of the day. Gulls circle and keep their distance, respectful as parishioners at a quiet miracle. Reef towns must be courted, not conquered. The child lowers the bucket labeled for stars and lifts a bucket of water starlit from below. He pours it back in with both hands, a toast. The map on the crate breathes as if a name is about to write itself under maybe here. The handbell sits very still, the way bells do when they understand they are present for something that needs silence to grow. They mark kindness instead of miles here, too. A crab with one oversized claw waves in a way that could be warning or welcome. They wave back until it decides on welcome. A small squall scrapes past and nearly snags the sail. The new yellow coat mistakes itself for a flag and flaps bravely until the breeze laughs and lets go. The child hums the biscuit bravery tune into the current and hears it come back sugared and slow. Evening arrives in apricot and rose. The reef dims from within, not going dark but choosing softer lamps. The boat drifts at the end of its line like a cradle held by a careful hand. Supper is soup the color of sunset, bread that forgives, and a single square brittle. They did not take, but were given by a trader who swore it broke into the shape you needed. They break it, and the pieces look like little sails. The hat with the bent brim approves. As the first real star shows itself, the child writes reef on a slip of paper, adds it to the jar of names, and gives the jar a gentle shake. The sound it makes is the sound of future places greeting present ones. The bearded storyteller scratches a new thumbprint onto the map where maybe here has earned the right to be sure. The whale hums an agreement that travels through wood into bone, a lullaby from the old dark deep. They speak the day's lessons so the night can keep them. Lesson 1. Towns float because people hold each other up. Lesson 2. Storms accept snacks. Lesson 3. Reefs answer to music and manners. Lesson 4. The map fills with flavors faster than with distances. Lesson 5. Some miracles prefer you look and not lick. The anchor line draws a soft line on the water, a sentence saying, "Stay a while." The boat settles. The reef sings almost below hearing, a sugar hymn for anyone who chooses to be kind. The child puts the nap pillow under his cheek, tucks the yellow coat over his legs, and lets the whistle dangle so it can collect a little moon. The handbell dreams of soup. The broom guards the corner where worries would sit if they were allowed aboard and finds the corner pleasantly empty. Above, constellations arrange themselves into jars tipping stars toward the horizon they have chosen. The current strokes the hull like a parent smoothing hair. The hat with the bent brim slips lower in a vow to keep watch. The bearded storyteller wraps the blanket that remembers warmth around both of them and hums a line that sounds like oars and bread and safe. Sleep arrives by boat, slow and sure. The reef dims one note more, the whale sinks just enough to build a pillow under the keel, and the sea goes on turning pages in a book too big to finish and too dear to stop reading. The map, open on the crate, glows the faintest sugar blue where new names have softened the white. The child breathes with the tide. Somewhere inside the quiet, a line of the chart writes itself, "To the sweet place, continue gently." Morning slides a ribbon of pale sugar across the reef, and the boat answers by stretching like someone who slept well. The child wakes with the whistle warm against his chest and the yellow coat learning the ship by heart from its peg. Below, the whale rises with a whoom and sets one round eye to the surface, the old deep checking on the young day. The bearded storyteller tips the hat with the bent brim and tastes the breeze the way bakers taste air before they name a dough. Weather, he says, wants a snack and a song. They pay the reef with courtesy before they go. A dip of the bucket labeled for stars poured back with both hands like a toast. A single note on the tin whistle, thread thin, lemon bright. The sugar city answers with a chord you feel more than hear, and a single chip of clear brittle floats up, not to be taken, only to show the day a better mood. The handbell stays quiet, out of respect. The map on the crate seems to breathe, ready for a new thumbprint. Past the reef's polite edge, the taffy current gathers ambition. Clouds knit themselves with licorice twist edges. The compass points toward laughter, but its needle trembles a little, as if too many jokes at once have made it shy. The child tightens a line until it hums in the same key as the whale's steady note. He lays the nap pillow near the tiller in case bravery needs to sit. The quartermaster cat posts itself by the jars like a striped sentry, whiskers measuring barometric manners. Rule 3 clears its throat. If you see a storm, give it a snack. The child unwraps the sugar cubes soaked in storm cordial and lowers it into the teapot the way you lower a compliment into a quarrel. Steam slips out, smelling like rain with good intentions. The bearded storyteller sets the handbell beside the helm and puts his palm on it lightly so the clapper remembers patience. He tells the wind, "We will listen if you do." The first sigh of the gale lifts the hair off their foreheads. A friendly ruffle from a large ant deciding whether to visit. Sails belly and then think better of it. The whale swims starboard, shouldering a little swell into a lullaby. Bell, breath, bell. The child counts heartbeats out loud until the counting becomes the shape of the air. He pulls the yellow coat on. It fits like a promise. The hat with the bent brim leans in to keep his eyes dry, more bodyguard than brim. Rain arrives with good manners, every drop announcing itself, but none shouting. The boat bows to each wave as if greeting a line of patient elders. The rope knots, taught yesterday as hugs, reveal their second trick. How to tell the hands that tied them, "You're not alone." The storyteller sings into the wind about biscuits that don't mind crumbs and brooms that sweep worries right off the deck and into the appetite of the sea. The gale, flattered by being treated as a person and not a verdict, chooses drama without meanness. For a minute the world is all gray lace and round notes. The reef vanishes behind gauze. The barrel town is a rumor. The taffy current pulls like a friend who knows the way. Lightning signs its name on a distant cloud and immediately blushes at its own handwriting. The handbell rings once, not as alarm, but as announcement. Soup later. The child answers with the whistle, a high line threaded through the wind's big music. The tune about biscuits and bravery returns to him sugared and slow, even weather hums along. Then, as quickly as a laugh changes a face, the gale remembers it has other places to be. The licorice edges unknit. Rain becomes a suggestion. The sails huff, forgive the sky, and settle into work. The compass stops trembling and points straight at the smell of cinnamon somewhere ahead. The whale surfaces, exhales a long ribbon of relief, and blinks a thank you at the small yellow coat that stayed bright when the day went dim. Storms always leave gifts when they leave politely. This one drops a path no chart can keep, a lane of slicked-down silver where waves remember being combed. They follow it toward low lights that quiver like spoons and cups. Out of the softening dusk, boats begin to gather the way neighbors do when someone opens a door and lets soup smell escape. Narrow skiffs, plump barges, a raft with a kettle nailed to its heart. Lines toss, fenders kiss. A village stitches itself with rope right on top of the sea. Welcome, says everything without speaking. The night bakery is open. Its ovens glow the color of safe. Flour drifts in the air like a hush. On the main barge, a woman with forearms like dependable weather turns dough with the grace of someone folding blankets over day-worn feet. She bakes lantern loaves, round breads with windows cut in their crust, light tucked inside like secrets that want to be kind. When she slides one onto their deck, the boat smells briefly like every kitchen that ever forgave a long day. Payment is story, she says. The child tells about the reef that sings back if you play your whistle soft, and she nods as if putting a pinch of sugar into that memory to keep it fresh. Stalls bloom across the water. One sells moon biscuits dusted with something that sparkles only when you're thinking of someone you like. Another sells rope pretzels that uncoil into useful lengths after you eat the middle. A third sells jars labeled rain saved for later, fog in a good mood, and thunder you can hum along to. The quartermaster cat inspects a basket of fish-shaped rolls and stamps approval by sitting in it. The baker laughs and leaves the cat-shaped dent intact. The barber, with the comb carved from a whale's kind memory, trims storm-tossed bangs on a plank that flexes to the swell, snip-snip on the beat. The child pays the debt promised in the floating town, one song when the wind needed it. He whistles, thin as thread, and the night market hums harmony in a circle around him. Kettles, ropes, oars tapped with knuckles, ovens sighing. The gale's last loose thread gets woven into music and stops tugging at the day. The bearded storyteller trades soup for a story about a lighthouse that learned to blink in a new language, and in return receives a packet of spice that smells like cinnamon and always arriving just in time. The whale parks under the pie barge like a benevolent foundation. Every so often, a pie cooling on a sill shivers as the big back breathes, and the baker says, "Thank you to no one," and to exactly the right someone. Between bites and bows, the child writes new names on slips of paper and drops them into the jar. Lantern loaf, rope pretzel, rain saved for later, bakery afloat. The sound the jar makes is the sound of belonging getting heavier in the best way. The map, open to the page where maybe had turned a reef, acquires a new thumbprint at the place the silver lane touched the cinnamon smell. The thumbprint shines like a small moon that knows how to feed a crowd. When the last batch goes in, the oven keeper pours tea that tastes like dried orange peel and kind decisions. They drink with both hands around the cups because warmth is better when you give it your undivided fingers. The baker ties a ribbon of cooling bread across the handbell so it will ring like supper next time, not like weather. The quartermaster cat curls in a crate that once held flour and now holds purr. Night thickens to a velvet you could spread on toast. Small lamps skip from boat to boat, reflections making a second market under the water. Children on other decks dangle lines to catch passing compliments. They haul up "well done," "nice try, and you did enough today," dripping and grinning. The child ties 3 of those to the rail where he can see them when the morning asks for bravery. Before the boats drift apart, a quiet prophet with a ledger made of sailcloth walks the planks, asking what the day taught. She writes in the tidy hand of someone who knows recipes are really maps. The child and the bearded storyteller offer theirs so the night can keep them. Lesson 1. Storms behave better when you give them a job and a snack. Lesson 2. A rope knows the sound of your voice. Speak kindly to its work. Lesson 3. Music can stitch what weather tries to pull. Lesson 4. The sea throws parties for people who tidy up after themselves. Lesson 5. Cinnamon and courage share a shelf. Lines untie as if the tide were a gentle boss telling everyone to clock out. The night bakery thins to a thread, then to crumbs of light, then to memory you can reheat by talking about it. The boat rides lighter, full in the right places. The whale gives the hull a shoulder so soft you could mistake it for the ocean forgiving something. The wind turns pages carefully until it finds the one titled afterward. They anchor in the lee of a low island shaped like a loaf that rose perfectly. The lantern loaf on their deck throws friendly windows onto the sail, where moths practice figure eights like little sailors in training. The child tucks the nap pillow under his cheek and slides the yellow coat over his knees. The hat with the bent brim takes watch at the crown of his head, brim tilted in the universal language of, "I've got this." The bearded storyteller sets the handbell within reach and spreads the blanket that remembers warmth until it remembers again. He hums the barber's beat, the baker's oven sigh, the reef's lemon note, the gale's better self. The broom stands in the corner where worries would have sat and finds the corner empty on schedule. The compass, satisfied with a day well pointed, nosedives quietly toward sleep. The sea reads them a chapter from its endless book. A paragraph of small waves, a sentence of far-off surf, a comma made of a rope creak, ellipses of whale breath. The map glows a soft sugar blue where thumbprints give night something to hold. The jar of names settles with the hush of marbles and velvet. Above, stars hang like buns cooling on a rack. No wind can jostle. One winks as if the oven light blinked. The boat rocks steady, the way a promise keeps time. The child sleeps the sleep of sailors who used kindness as their compass. Somewhere on the wide water, the night bakery catches another breeze, and anyone who needs it can follow the smell of cinnamon right through the dark. Morning rises like warm steam from a kettle, and the boat answers by sighing into shape. The lantern loaf throws small squares of light across the deck, the way kindness throws small squares of courage across a day. The whale surfaces with a womb as steady as bread rising. The bearded storyteller tastes the air, eyes half closed, and says the sky is thinking about cinnamon again. The hat with the bent brim agrees by shading the child's eyes just enough to make bravery feel like sipping. They set the handbell where it can hear the wind and loosen the line that keeps the map from curling too pleased with itself. Thumbprints glitter where miles would have been. The jar of names sits fat and content. Every time it settles, the sound is exactly the hush of being kept. The quartermaster cat completes rounds with whiskered authority, then parks on the coil of rope labeled stubborn to teach it patience by example. The taffy current carries them into a wide place where the sea seems to practice its posture. In the distance, a low hum appears, as if the horizon is clearing its throat before speaking. As they draw closer, the sound becomes many voices, all soft, all sure. Notes layered like blankets. The cartographer's choir has moored itself in a slow circle. Skiffs tied bow to stern, sailcloth stretched into an awning, a conductor's mast wearing a pennant that says hush in 5 languages you can hum. Maps are being sung into being. Staves of melody lay down coastlines. Harmonies fill in bays. A deep alto draws the shape of a safe harbor, with the vowel in the word home. The child stands very still so the map inside him can hear better. The bearded storyteller bows low as if he's arrived at a kitchen that feeds anyone who knows how to be grateful. A cartographer with hands inked to the wrist gestures them in and offers a tin of pencils that smell like cedar and secrets. Payment is either a story or a name learned recently enough to still be warm. The child sets the jar on a plank table and reads a few labels aloud: reef, lantern loaf, rope pretzel, rain saved for later, and the choir hums each one into the paper. Lines bloom. A narrow channel appears where courage disguised as hard candy once sat between 2 palms. A shoal unlurks. A dotted path arrives. Small kindnesses, stitched together until they look like direction. Someone hums a problem, a light gone dim, where a lighthouse ought to be laughing. The choir tilts its voices toward that corner of the sea, and a name arrives, Kindling Point, written in a note that tastes faintly of orange peel and late decisions. The child ties the new yellow coat a little tighter. The hat with the bent brim leans forward, listening like a lookout. The whale turns in place, and the boat feels the pivot down in its bones, that agreeable, bone-deep yes when a destination chooses you back. They slip away on the current like a polite rumor. The song follows, a soft thread the boat keeps between its teeth, like a good knot. Midday grows out of morning the way bread grows out of flour and patience. On the quarterdeck, the child copies 2 lines from the sung map into their own. A sandbar shaped like a sleeping spoon, a patch of water called the Forget-Me Shallows, where people misplace their frowns and never look for them again. The forget-me-shallows live up to their name. As they cross, the bearded storyteller forgets a small worry he'd been feeding crumbs to, and looks wonderfully relieved without knowing why. The quartermaster cat forgets to pretend not to like head scratches and purrs into the stubborn coil until the coil becomes merely firm. The handbell, tempted to ring for soup, forgets to hurry and instead sits like a round, useful thought. By afternoon, the sky becomes a sheet of clean paper. On the margin, a smudge of land appears, kindling point, ragged cliff, polite stairs carved by weather, a white tower shouldering up from rock like a tall cup saved for special tea. Close up, the lighthouse lens is fogged with sugar steam, as if someone's been baking inside the lamp for a century. At its foot, a door yawns like a gentle jaw. From somewhere deep in its throat, a patient stomach rumble, no, not hunger, but the memory of it. They make fast in a pocket of calm. The child tucks the nap pillow under his arm for the climb because kindness travels better when it's comfortable. Inside the lighthouse, stairs spiral, a ribbon of stone smelling faintly of salt and good intentions. Halfway up hangs a sign on a nail. Please feed the light before sunset. It gets peevish on an empty glow. The bearded storyteller chuckles, the sound of a kettle just before it sings. At the top, the lens waits like an eye that wants to see you first. Up close, you can tell, the fog is sweet, a glaze that keeps the light from making its usual far-traveling introductions. The child sets the lantern loaf on the catwalk and cuts it into windowed slices. He holds one slice up so its little square openings line up with the lens. Light warms through bread, glows out the other side, and remembers how to be a window. The lamp purrs, a glass purr, bright and pleased. They brew tea in a dented kettle someone left on purpose decades ago. The storm cordial went to good use yesterday, so today they sweeten with the last of the jam the color of sunset, pared thin across the lip of the cup. The bearded storyteller wipes the lens with a cloth that remembers flour, the night bakery's gift, and the glaze lets go, choosing to be memory instead of veil. The child taps the tin whistle once, a lemon thread note, and the lens catches it, holds it, lifts it, flings it gently down the wind toward boats that haven't realized yet how soon dusk will need a hand. Below, the whale shoulders the cliff in hello. From the point, the sea's grammar improves. Commas where pauses belong, exclamation points only for whales, and lightning that signs politely. The hat with the bent brim approves the way hats do, by staying on in a breeze. A keeper emerges from a nap behind a door they hadn't seen. Old boots, softer eyes, thanks them with a biscuit that crumbles like applause. Payment is a simple request. Say 3 names into the lamp so it can remember what it's for. The child says harbor, barrel town, bakery afloat, and the lamp repeats each one in a circle of light that travels out, finds the choir, catches on the singing lines, and returns as encouragement. They linger just long enough to chalk a recipe on the wall. Light equals tea, plus bread windows, plus names spoken kindly. And then the tide taps its watch. Back on deck, the breeze has laid out a clean path toward a low hum from the east. It smells like sugar, yes, and like something else rarer, the precise peace of arriving slowly. On the way, they pass a bureau of bottles, tide drift gathered into a quiet eddy where messages clock in to be sorted. Volunteers read aloud with the seriousness of librarians. Forgive me, I did. I'm almost there, you are. Bring cinnamon we have, do you remember? Yes. The child adds a slip that says we fed the light, and it purred, signed with a thumbprint shaped like a moon. The bureau stamps it with a small whale and tosses it into a current that always finds the person who needs it. Evening comes dressed in apricot and copper. The sung map's thread becomes visible in the very air. a faint silver stitching that tightens when they drift and loosens when they steer true. The handbell, ribboned by the baker, taps once on its own and means supper, but also safe. They heave to in the lee of a reefless shoal shaped like a baker's peel. The whale floats just under, a floor of breathing. The quartermaster cat chooses the tallest coil for throne and yawns in semaphore, today achieved. Supper is soup that learned a cinnamon trick at the night bakery, bread that forgives butter even when butter is too enthusiastic, and a polite square of brittle gifted by the keeper for the road, broken into sails again. How sweet things love to become boats. The child writes lighthouse on a slip of paper, slips it into the jar, and shakes it just enough to make the sound of belonging grow heavier by one name. Before true dark, the cartographer's choir sends a distant chord, a good-night check-in, a we have you. The lamp at kindling point answers with the bright blink you can feel in your ribs. Between those two comforts, the boat rocks, cradled like a sugar spoon on the rim of a big mug. They speak the day's lessons so the night can copy them neatly. Lesson 1, names told kindly turn on lights. Lesson 2, some maps are sung and some are eaten by jars, both kinds true. Lesson 3, when you forget a frown, don't go back for it. Lesson 4, a little jam persuades even stubborn glass. Lesson 5, if you feed the light, it will remember to feed you back. The handbell lies down on its ribbon and dreams of soup that tastes like arriving on time. The broom stands in the corner where worries would have sat, finds it empty, and decides to learn the beat from the choir in case of dust. The compass, finished pointing toward laughter for the day, points at the child's slow breath and calls that north. Night climbs aboard with bare feet. Stars hang like buns cooling on a rack. No wind can steal. The whale hums from below, a long note that says, everything you did was enough. The hat with the bent brim takes watch from the crown of a small, salt-sweet head and does not blink. The map glows faint sugar blue where kindling point now rests, a thumbprint bright as a lantern's window. Sleep comes like a tide that knows the stairs by heart. The boat keeps time. The sea turns another page in its endless book and pauses on a sentence that tastes like tomorrow. Far off, beyond the tidy grammar of the point, something sweet hums, like a bakery behind a hill, the kind of hum that makes mornings hurry kindly. Not yet, says the bearded storyteller to the sky with a smile. Soon the wind agrees and pulls the blanket higher over the child's shoulders. Morning peels itself like an orange and lays the scent across the water. The boat wakes with a stretch you can hear in the ropes. The whale lifts a womb and leaves a smooth hill of comfort under the keel. The bearded storyteller sips the air, eyes smiling, and says the horizon is sugaring its tea. The hat with the bent brim settles on the child's head at the exact angle for arriving. They stow the blanket that remembers warmth and set the handbell where it can catch the wind's mood. The jar of names rides heavy in the right way. The map lies open on the crate, thumbprints gleaming like small moons, a blank waiting in the corner where stories have been pointing all along. The quartermaster cat patrols, thumping once on the coil labeled stubborn to remind it we're trying softness today. The taffy current lays a silver ribbon straight ahead, then doubles it with a second strand because sometimes kindness overdoes it, and no one complains. The gulls draft punctuation, ellipsis for patience, exclamation when a shoal asks for a slower rudder. The child hums the biscuit and bravery tune under his breath, and the water nods. The yellow coat flutters at its peg, learning the weather by ear. At first the sweet place is only a rumor in the light, a gleam that refuses to hold still. Then it is there, no trumpet, only a widening hush. An island low and kind, its beaches squeaking like sugar when the tide breathes, its dunes scalloped like spoonfuls. Trees lean inward, their branches ribboned with candied fruit that learn not to be greedy. The air smells like cinnamon and clean sails, like baking done by someone who knows when to stop. They shorten canvas and slide along the lee where the small waves wear lace. The anchor finds a polite idea to hold. The boat sighs, relieved to have hands to place its day in. The whale circles once, the old deep's bow. The child steps ashore, and his feet read the beach aloud. Yes, yes, yes. He writes the island's name on nothing and everything by smiling. No one guards the sweet place. It guards itself by being generous. A sign written in shell says, "Share more than you take, and the island will never run out." They tuck the handbell's ribbon into the crook of an elbow and walk the soft path where the dune grass whispers directions. Candy grows here, yes, but also mercy. Shade in the hour that asks, water where a cup is waiting, laughter caught in the low branches like kite tails. They feed the place before they taste it. The child opens the jar of names and tips 3 into the wind: reef, bakery afloat, kindling point. And the island answers with a low, melted note, the exact sound sugar makes when it decides to be glass. The bearded storyteller sets the lantern loaf's last heel on a flat stone for birds who know how to thank you with their wings. The quartermaster cat stamps the rule with a whisker twitch and sits squarely in the shade so everyone knows what sharing looks like at rest. They try one thing, then stop. A sliver of lemon ribbon that snaps between the teeth and turns into memory of sunrise. They laugh once and call it enough. The island seems pleased, shrugging a little breeze across their shoulders the way a friend straightens your collar. The child adds a pebble to the jar as if names sometimes arrive without letters. It makes the sound of belonging growing heavier by one breath. On the far side of a dune, the sand grades into a courtyard of packed sweetness, with footprints baked into it forever. The kind of forever that means tomorrow and the day after, not the kind that steals today. Children's steps, an old boot, a careful circle where someone must have danced while stirring a pot. A wooden sign points at the sky, Weather's Bakery, and grins without moving. They work because arriving is a verb. The storyteller mends a small tear in a windbreak, his needle pulling a song through canvas. The child sweeps a path with the deck broom. Worries have been scarce, so the broom is delighted to be useful. And the bristles learn the island's beat. The whale hums into the sandbar and turns it from a snag to a pillow. The hat, with the bent brim, sits on a post to guard their cups. The handbell rings once, very softly, to declare soup likely. When noon rubs its eyes, they rest in the shade of trees that make their own wind. They pour tea for the island, one cup set on the low stone the way you leave a saucer for a cat, who never quite admits it lives with you. They eat bread that forgives butter and a parcel of brittle, the lighthouse keeper pressed into the bearded hand, broken into boat-shaped pieces because sweet things love to travel. The child closes his eyes and hears the cartographer's choir at the edge of sense, singing a thin silver line that ties this here to that there. In the afternoon, they climb the only hill worth climbing. At the top, the sea lays itself out like paper, and the sung map brightens, thread visible in the air, tugging gently from every name they've learned. He can point to each kindness as if it were a star. Barrel streets bobbing, Candy Reef humming, bakery afire with safe, lighthouse purring, choir scribbling the world by voice. He feels the road back home arrive inside his chest, not ahead of his feet. The bearded storyteller nods because this is the lesson. Maps always hide. The way out is made of the way in, stitched by the work you did being gentle. They don't pick more. They thank more. The child plays one lemon thread on the whistle, not for permission, but for gratitude. The trees lift leaves in a yes that sounds like soft applause. The island leaves a gift in their path. 3 stones shaped like commas, good for resting sentences when they get too long. He pockets them because stories at sea should breathe like people. Before the light tilts, they launch. The whale shoulders them free with grandmotherly care. As the anchor rises, the island writes a sugar line under the surface that points not just away, but toward. A dotted sweetness threading the water where kindness gathers. The boat finds it like a bird finds a warm draft. The handbell chimes once on its ribbon, and the sound means home and soup. And you did enough today, all at once. They measure the return in names. Reef check. The water glows under the keel with the rehearsal light. Choir check. A cord crosses their path and tightens their knots just by being near. Kindling point check. A blink from the lamp lands in their ribs and settles. Night bakery. The wind brings cinnamon and a rumor of flour dust lanterns. They wave at the dark like true regulars. Barrel Town, check. Somewhere a saw singer hits a sweet note on purpose and gulls blink slower. By the time the harbor's shape rises, the breakwater like a held breath, the driftwood house practicing its lighthouse smile, the lantern loaf's windows have turned to true lamp squares, and every hinge along the wharf creaks their names like old friends forgetting to be shy. The hat with the bent brim tips itself to the building that kept their pillows warm in their absence. The quartermaster cat steps ashore and inspects everything, then stamps approval by sitting on the warmest coil. Neighbors lean out of windows with mugs. The bakery 2 doors back pretends it never slept and sends a cinnamon breeze down the lane. They make a landing not as an arrival but as a continuation, lines on, fenders kissed. A last womb under the floorboards as the whale tucks them in from below. The child touches the post the way you touch a shoulder, and the post remembers him. Inside the driftwood house, the jar of names goes to the ledge where the harbor can read it. The map, sticky with thumb moons, gets a new print on the corner that used to be blank and now tastes like made it. The broom returns to its corner of honor. The bell sits ribboned and ready to ring for soup. The yellow coat hangs with a crease at the elbow that says, "It did real work." The hat with the bent brim chooses its peg with ceremony and then leans toward the bed in a stance that means, "I'm watching while you don't have to." They speak the voyage so the room can keep it. Lesson 1. Sweetness multiplies when shared. Take less, thank more. Lesson 2. Storms answer snacks and songs. Lesson 3. Names told kindly turn on lights and open doors. Lesson 4. Maps can be sung, baked, rung, hummed, and thumbed. Lesson 5. The way home is made while leaving. Soup arrives because that is what soup does when you've earned it, and also when you haven't. They eat the day down to crumbs. The whale hums one long stare down into the deep and leaves a cushion of sound under the floor. Outside, the pier rocks the buildings to sleep on schedule. A gull mutters a punchline it just now got. The harbor counts breaths the way a good friend counts stars with you. Slow, wrong on purpose, happy anyway. The child presses his ear to the wall for the ocean's heartbeat and hears it closer than ever, not because the sea moved, but because his chest did. He tucks the nap pillow under his cheek and pulls the blanket that remembers warmth up to his eyes. Through the quilt's little window of world, he sees the moon lay a silver road on the water and knows that road leads both out and back. because it always has. He falls asleep to the harbor's lullaby, ropes humming, beams agreeing, kettles voting yes. The handbell dozes, promising to ring only for soup and celebrations. The broom stands easy, worries are off duty. The compass points at the slow lift of a small sailor's breath and calls that north again. Night leans its whole weight on the roof without breaking anything. The driftwood house holds, the dock holds, the boat holds, the world holds. Somewhere out beyond the breakwater, the sweet place glows very faint, like a bakery behind a hill, content for once to be visited later. The island has nothing to prove. Neither do they. Sleep comes the way a tide comes when it knows the stairs by heart. Down below, the whale's breath times the room. Up above, stars hang like buns, cooling where no wind can reach them. The harbor saves them a seat in tomorrow and sits beside tonight until it is quiet enough to hear slippers and pages and the tiny, satisfied click of a candy jar that knows it will never be empty as long as sharing keeps watch. Good night, Sleepy Cartoon fan. Remember, SleepyToons loves you. Let everything soften now. The farmhouse porch light is clicking to a warm hush. The lantern road has bowed for the night. The mint-green city has dimmed to moon, and the harbor is rocking your thoughts like a small, kind boat. The lighthouse remembers your name. The attic TV turns its dial one last time and smiles in the dark. The wind chime whispers back soon, got you warm soup. The bell keeps one perfect note. You did enough today. Set the map down. It will finish itself while you rest. Let your shoulders agree with your pillow. Breathe like tide, in out safe. If a worry wanders up, feed it a tiny kindness and watch it yawn. The jar of names is full, the lantern loaf is warm, and the whale is humming under the floorboards just to keep time for your dreams. Close your eyes. The stars will take your watch. When morning knocks, it will be gentle. Until then, drift easy, held by everything that loves you back. Sleep well. Good night.